Yeah, we live still. Let me see. We just gone live. Probably people are gonna start coming in. Let me wait a few seconds for people to roll in. Let me get the video up so I can see comments. You are on your mobile phones as well, right?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I'm on my mobile. Yeah.
You can't even look at the comments in that. You need to upgrade on the laptop.
I can't see the comments.
My computer's so ancient that it wouldn't let me even get Hangouts on it. So.
Yeah.
But maybe Leon, if there are any notable comments that you want to put to us, so if there's something that you see that you think we should respond to, and you should put it to the group, and we'll, respond accordingly. So you can say, "Oh, well, Sam or anyone."
Insulting or otherwise.
All right.
Of course, always.
Cool. Give me one sec. So what we were talking about Tommy in the background. Obviously, the title of this show is Knife Crime and Stop and Search. Something that Sam wanted to discuss. But
I think it's a particularly sort of poignant issue at the moment with what's going on in London. Knife crime is clearly an issue. We've just surpassed the murder rate. We've seen over 80 people murdered in London, in the capital, so far this year. And knife crime and gun crime is a really big part of that. And I think that there is a relationship between the repealing of stop and search laws and the explosion of crime in capital. So that's really what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
I want to go into it, but I want the big man them to roll through, because I know they're up on their thing probably a bit more than me as well. You get me? So yeah. I don't mind in the meantime continuing on the conversation that we was having in the back chat. You get me?
Yeah. So we're talking about Tommy Robinson.
Tommy Robinson.
We've got a new follower.
Yeah.
Tommy.
I'm going to there's a march on Saturday. Actually, I think it is.
There's a march, yeah.
Yeah,
I heard about that. Still, I'm going to be doing some.
Yeah, so there's
still.
Yeah, so there's a pro Tommy march on the 3rd of August, which is Saturday. It's starting at 12 p.m. In Oxford Circus. We're meeting in Oxford Circus, and then from there we're going to probably march down to Westminster. But it's in defence of the fact that Tommy has been imprisoned for causing anxiety to Muslim paedophiles, and we think that individuals who express their anger against people who are just expressing their mind is wrong. Like, you shouldn't be in jail for confronting convicted Muslim paedophiles in the court of justice. It had already been charged. It was down to, it was at their sentencing hearing.
That's me.
It has absolutely nothing to do with the charge.
Your mic's cutting out, man.
Can you still hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
But, probably when you start talking, I think it might start cutting out again. But give me one second.
So
give me 1 second. Let me just aid out the people them that's in the chat right now. Peace to Toy Team. Yes, live still. You can jump on if you want. I'll send man a link. You get me? Fireblade.
Yeah. So the reason that Tommy Robinson was charged, he was charged on the basis of causing anxiety to already convicted Muslim paedophiles on the on the premise or under the guise of the fact that he caused anxiety or that he perverted the course of justice, which he didn't do because they'd already been charged. It was a sentencing hearing. So it's a complete farce, and I don't understand how Geoffrey Cox brought this back again to the Royal Courts of Justice. In the US, we had double jeopardy yaws. Here in the UK, we had double jeopardy yaws that were retracted, and they were effectively binned after being involved in our legal system for 800 years. And then we see this now. So we see somebody that's charged for something, jailed for something, released for something on appeal, and then jailed again, which is it's a complete breach of double jeopardy. And I think we should bring back double jeopardy, and Tommy Robinson should be released from prison.
Agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a political move as well, though, isn't it? I mean, it's no coincidence that it happened around the same time as his campaign during the European elections, and they were obviously wanting to bring these trumped up charges against him in order to sort of smear his name and also kind of send him a message to what happens if you speak out against the establishment.
And that's the thing, is like when people call Tommy Robinson a fascist, the funny thing about fascism, if you look at fascism by its literal definition, you look at the fact that fascism was defined by Benito Mussolini, and Benito Mussolini said fascism is nothing against the state, everything within inside the state, and nothing from outside the state. And so effectively what Tommy Robinson has been charged with is speaking out against the state, which is effectively and tantamount to nothing against the state, which is a tenet of fascism. So if you try to call Tommy Robinson a fascist, then you're in contravention of the very definition of the term itself. It doesn't make any sense.
You just proved an utter lack of understanding of both Tommy and of fascism itself.
You man, pause a minute. Let me
all right.
Let me just address the people them in the chat still. Cause I was just aiming at the man them still, but you just cut, man. But
yeah.
Cause you're saluting your guy, you get me? Your guy.
My guy.
Yeah. Big up Tanver Chima. Big up my brother, Veli Vision. Right. And also, obviously we're gonna go into the topic soon still. I wanted to wait for Scattered Minds and Raven and Shakara to jump on. Cause them man I believe would probably be better at discussing that topic, you get me? But we're going to talk about something in the meantime. So the panel's open. If anybody's interested in jumping on, send me an email, contentovereverything@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link. You can jump on and we discuss the topic, hear me? But aid up Captain Rambo, don't know, new to marriage matchmaker. I like cards, Nicky Owen, Raheem Pepe, Ajay Gunman, Mundo 5, False Religions. All right, that's everybody. So yeah, all right, cool. Let's get back into whether Tommy Robinson's racist or not.
Yeah, lovely. Well, I've yet to see an argument, being made, a good argument that he is racist myself. And I come, and I'm not trying to distinguish myself from anyone else here, because I think there are people like this, but I speak as someone who was formerly, I'd like to say in my youth, but when I was even younger, very anti-Tommy. And I did kind of buy into this whole, he's a fascist, he's a thug, he's just spouting nonsense against Muslims. I used to hate the man, really. And I don't know quite what it is, but I've just turned around from that.
Well, if I can have my perspective, because I work, closely with the guy, I've spent a lot of time with the guy. I work with individuals who are the editor of TR News. Okay. And what I want to say about the guy is that he's not a racist in no way, shape or form. Yeah. I mean, the fact that we've got Avi Yamini, who's an Israeli-Australian Jew, who is quite frankly the antithesis of what people say about him. They say that he's racist and he's not. I think that what you can, perhaps the first kind of comprehension of him, and maybe me and Jacob can agree on this, is that I thought that he was a racist. I thought that he was, this, ostracized individual who spoke out about many different groups. But the fact of the matter is that he didn't. If you actually look into what he campaigns against, which is Muslim grooming gangs, at the end of the day, there is a comprehensive responsibility that exists within Pakistani grooming, Pakistani communities, Pakistani Muslim communities. But he's not a racist by any stretch of the imagination. He's got support from individuals like Raheem Kassam. He's another editor that I've worked for, who's an ex-Muslim. And so to call him a racist is just absurd and duplicitous, because he's not. I think really what he's about, he's a patriotic Brit that lives in a place, Luton, that has seen Islam and Islamization destroy his local community through things like rape and grooming. And I don't think grooming is even a worthy way of putting it. We should not use the term grooming. We should start using the term child rape, because that's what it is.
Yeah. And I agree as well. I mean, like, he even takes the sort of the more centrist position of disagreeing with David Cameron when Cameron says that multiculturalism has failed, and Tommy says no, multiculturalism hasn't failed in Luton, as far as you can see. The Hindus, the Jews, he basically points to every other community other than the Islamic one, and also maintains he's got plenty of Muslim friends in Luton, but just says that what's wrong with everyone's against paedophilia. No one's pro paedophiles. But it's like when you start talking about this issue, suddenly it's all sort of sensitive, despite opinions that from anyone else would seem to be quite sort of reasonable and moderate.
Yeah, so for me, my personal perspective, so I was born in London, but I went to school in Loughborough, which is near to Leicester, and so we had communities like Bangladeshis, we had a very strong Sikh community, Hindus as well. Yeah. And there was no failure for them to assimilate. And coming from a Jewish background, I've got Jewish family members as well. My grandmother is Jewish, so I'm, de facto Jewish. There was no problem with assimilation. The problem with assimilation literally falls on one group, and that's Islam and Muslims. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at, and we need to question that. I mean, you can say, why are they not integrating into British society, into British culture? Because it doesn't exist within any other group. And so everybody that says, oh, it's a racism thing, it's not a racism thing. I remember being invited to a Gurdwara, a Sikh temple, on a school trip as a child, and we used to go there every year. We'd sit down, we'd have food together, we'd have conversations. Very good friends that were Sikhs, very good friends that were Hindus. But now, where I live in London, we've got a very large Muslim community, and they do not want to assimilate, and they don't even want to speak to you. I say hello to them as we walk out of, I walk out of my flat. They don't say hello. They completely ignore you. Islam is fundamentally a fascist regime. It's oppressive against women to a monumental degree, and I don't think that it can be a part of a progressive Western society.
You ever discuss your views on Islam in the park?
Leon, to be honest with you, I try not to, because I find that, and I think that you'll probably be able to comment on this as well, is that Speaker's Corner has it's got a natural divide. It's got a divide between constructive liberal conversations on the left-hand side of the corner, and once you go over a certain line, it's Christians and Muslims yelling at each other. And so I find it very difficult to actually engage in the debate that I want to put forward, because there's a whole Wahhabist Islam who you can, and the Salafists as well, you can determine by the clothing that they're wearing. So it's very difficult to have this kind of a conversation with individuals apart. And often what you see is when you actually try and raise any of these issues with Islam, you find that you will have the guys that are representatives, the guys that are preaching the dua, so guys like Ali Dua and Mohammed Hijab, who are all very considerate individuals and intellectual individuals, I'll give them that. But there's always somebody in the background who is aggressive and ready to literally attack you. And a guy like that would be somebody like Modin, who was banned from the park, and rightly so. And he's allowed back in now. But there are always individuals who will be willing to get aggressive. And so for me to go in there and start, cussing Islam in the way in which Tommy would be supportive of, would be dangerous for me as an individual.
Yeah, it'd be unsafe. I mean,
what I'm saying, obviously, sorry, Jacob, let me just reply to that still. Obviously, we got the Identity Politics Forum. It's not primarily put together for anything other than identity. Well, I suppose that can kind of fall into it still, because Muslim is an identity. You get me? So probably
Well, the identity politics.
It's an ideology.
Yeah, I hear you still, but people introduce themselves as Muslim as part of that identity. People do that still. So, well, I think it would be something that could be discussed in there in the same manner that we usually have.
But the thing is, Leon, the thing is that I find within the Identity Politics Forum is one of the things that we have the capacity to have a conversation around, and one of the reasons that we can have a discussion is because we're not Muslim. And because we're not.
No, you're crazy. There's Muslims in the Identity Politics Forum, fam. All of the ones that are with you, there's Muslims in there.
So it's a specific. There's a certain type of Muslim.
But are they Sunni? Are they Sunni Wahhabist or Salafist, or are they Shia? Because I find, in my personal experiences, Shia Muslims are moderate. They're moderate Muslims. You've got guys like Majid Nawaz, who convinced Tommy Robinson to leave the EDL. You've got guys that I've met at the corner, and consider some
Your
are
phone's doing the most
Shia.
right now, you know.
The guy
I never heard none of that still.
and
Hey, yo,
Sunnis.
hey, Sam. Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reception cut out on your phone.
Yeah,
Still, I never heard that.
Oh, sorry. So what I was saying is that I've not got a problem with Shias, for example. Shias I find to be considerate Muslims, moderate Muslims.
Yeah, but you know why Modine? No, I don't know actually. People say he's Shia, but I ain't never heard him say. He says he's just Muslim still. Yeah, I don't know.
I take issue with that, Sam, to be honest with you, because of course, there's nice Shias and there's bad Sunnis. I don't think Shia is a specifically better set. I think they might be less threatening at times simply because there's fewer of them. But I think if you look at the Shia regime in Iran, I think every bit any Sunni theocracy.
Sorry, I lost you there, Jacob. Cut out for some of what you just said. So
sorry. Okay, so it's like when you say the sort of you generally find Shiites to be sort of more amiable. I wonder about that, because if you look at Iran, which is like the one kind of majority Shia country, I wouldn't like to live there any more than I would any kind of Sunni theocratic state.
So this is the funny thing, is that I've actually been to Iran. So I've been to Tehran, and I've dated 3 Iranian women. I've got Iranian friends, and my friend Reza actually recently said to me, he's Iranian, who lives in Mayfair. He's a very well-off guy, so perhaps his perspective is somewhat skewed. But he said that Iran was a beautiful country until all of this, and I'm quoting directly, and I might be paraphrasing to a certain extent, but he said that the reason that they have issues in their country is because of religious extremism. And so I guess the way in which it's been described to me, and there was a guy called Mohammed at Speaker's Corner who described Sunniism to me, and he was a Shia, and he said that Sunniism is the first step towards Wahhabism and Salafism. And so I think there is a problem that exists within Islam, because there is an element of it that is a stepping stone to extremism. But also we could talk about the fact that all of the wars in the world and all of the disagreements in the world arguably are to do with religion, and are to do with religious divisions. And so an individual like me, and I would describe myself not as an atheist, but as an anti-theist.
Yeah.
A lot of this is to do with theism. And so I think if we got rid of theism, if we got rid of religion, we wouldn't be having the kind of arguments and debates that we'd be having with each other that we are under wars as well.
Yeah.
So
all right. Hey, yo, I'm a pause man there still.
Okay, yeah, sure. Let's carry that on another time.
There's some Muslims that I know, like I got their contact details for, that could probably arrange some good discussions on the issues that you're raising, like in a civilized, respectable tone. You get me? Right now we've got Rap Raven just coming to the place still. So I was gonna ask you even before that though. What would you say is your main concerns about London that you got at the moment? As we go into the knife crime, you get me? After.
Yes, for me personally, the concerns that I have about London is the fact that we've got we have a Muslim mayor who is so ardently progressive in his support of the LGBT community, which is so opposed to his very own religion, that says that being a homophobe or being gay is punishable by death, and that you should be stoned to death because of it. We've got somebody that is completely ignoring the fact that a lot of knife crime is being perpetrated by the very people who are from his religious group, and I don't understand that. But I guess, like, being more progressive about the argument is that a lot of the problems that we have, it's gang on gang violence, and this is one of the things that I agree with Jedi about, who comes to the corner a lot. And I've got a lot of respect for Jedi, because he's doing something actively rather than just being virtuous and saying, oh, I disagree with this. He's actually going out and he's campaigning to stop people from joining gangs. But the problem that we have is gang on gang violence, and gang on gang violence is fueled by drug abuse, and the people that are consuming the drugs that are being sold by Muslim and black and ethnic minority gangs is being consumed by white people. And I think the head of police actually came out and he said that he would have more success stop and searching people coming out of Westminster than he would stop and searching people on the streets.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, to be honest. To me, it's. I mean, I've got a lot of problems with Sadiq Khan, and you've listed a couple of them. But I don't make the criticism. Oh, he's a Muslim mayor, and therefore he's sort of biased, and he's kind of Islamifying the UK. That's not a kind of that's too crude an argument, I think. But what does bother me is that undeniably there has been this spike in all sorts of crime under him, and then it's also the fact that he just he seems to be completely, I don't know if he's unaware or he just doesn't care, but his measures, instead you go around and you see these sort of zebra crossings with like the LGBT rainbow. You're not going to convince gangs by sort of trying to kind of persuade them to love gays. It just doesn't.
Yeah. So if I could address that point, so if I could go through some figures here, let me know. Can you still hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay.
So, yeah, we can hear you. How's it going?
Cool. Hello, Raven. Hey, Raven. Raven, how are you? You well?
I'm very good.
Good to hear you, bro.
Good to see you.
Okay, so let's talk about the crime statistics under Sadiq Khan. So there's a guy
I've got a few myself, but you go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm reading from an article that I wrote actually for Political.
Oh, okay. You go for it.
And there's a guy called Gareth Bacon. He's the leader of the GLA Conservatives, and so he's a representative in City Hall. And his report cites that there's been a 24% increase in homicides from 2016 to 2018, which is the highest figure in 10 years. Knife crime has increased 52.3% over the same period. Residential burglary has increased 36.9%, and robbery has increased 59.3%. And so how can anyone look at those figures under a mayor and say that, and Sadiq Khan's words were that London is a safer city now? I just don't really understand how somebody can be supportive of an individual who's presided over a city that's led to a huge amount of bloodshed.
Yeah, well, those are the similar stats that I've got. The just the shooting up of knife crime. I think it was like 135 murders in 2018. Something like that.
And, that's right, 135.
Yeah, and then, but also, because I don't know if this was from the same study that we were looking at. I think I was looking at an analysis of that same article, but it also listed the fact that he's just the money he's spent and a sort of list of failed promises. And among these, what really struck me is there's 10 million pounds wasted on a test for police officers to assign their personality a colour.
I think you've read my article, Jacob. I think you've read my article. Because...
Oh, maybe. This was in a YouTube video that was, I think, linked to an article, so it could well be. But I read that and I thought, just for goodness sake.
But he's doing the same thing. It's like at the same time as he's supporting, he's there dancing around at the Pride Parade. There were. I need to get my facts straight here. But at the same time, whilst he was dancing around at the Pride Parade, there were. Here we go. Whilst Khan was dancing around Regent Street, the bloodshed in the capital continued. Friday night saw the shooting of a man in Wembley, the body of a woman being found on Blackheath. Another man was shot in the early hours of Sunday morning in Leighton, and another man was found unresponsive in Monk's Park at 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. So you've got 4 murder investigations across the weekend where Sadiq Khan was at Pride, going, oh yes, I'm pro-gay, when he's got a religion that is the antithesis of the very thing that he's supporting.
Yeah, it's incredible, really. In any other situation, you just think sort of, I want to say Orwellian, but Orwellian's a bit overused. But it's so strange. It's really, I can't quite wrap my head around. It's such a.
Is there anything in particular that you would like to see done as a course of action?
Well, the GLA Conservatives, in particular, the behest of Gareth Bacon, tabled a fully costed amendment to Sadiq Khan's budget that would see £82 million reallocated to the police force, that would see 1,837 more police officers on the streets of London. And so you see a lot at the moment. Sadiq Khan in particular has come out and he said that the problem that we have with policing is because of Conservative policy. But you've got Conservatives working in City Hall who have tabled fully costed amendments that would see more police on our streets in London. So I think that we need to actually address the fact that it's not it's not the Conservatives' fault. It's actually Labour's fault. And maybe we should listen to the GLA Conservatives. We should listen to people like Gareth Bacon. We need more police on our streets. And I know this is going to be a controversial issue, and I think maybe this is something that Raven and Leon can actually comment on themselves. But I think that despite the fact that stop and search is arguably more directed at black and minority ethnic individuals, I think that bringing back stop and search would stop people from carrying knives around willingly.
Do you mind if I just chime in, and then I want to hear someone from maybe the other side go on that in response? But I completely agree with you about stop and search. I think that ending it was a stupid idea, in the name of kind of, not wanting to be racist and all that nonsense. But
Sam,
the one thing... Sorry?
Sam, no,
sorry. Yeah. But the other thing I wanted to say is maybe disagree with Sam, with you a little bit more, is Peter Hitchens, I think, originally made this point, and he said that, often from the Conservative side as well, we hear this sort of myth about, we haven't got enough officers on the street, we need a greater police presence. And whilst I think that, yes, there is some accountability from Labour of having kind of reduced police levels, but I also think that Peter Hitchens says that, no, you go back to the 1960s where police, patrolled the streets and prevented crime before it happened, rather than acting as a sort of, fire engine response unit after it actually happened. And he said that you had far fewer numbers of officers on the streets than you do today, and yet crime was prevented much more successfully. So numbers, I think, are significant, but I wonder if maybe they're not the most crucial factor in this.
Right. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, you go, Raven. Hi.
Okay. So, obviously, you guys said a lot of things, and I've just come in late from a meeting. But,
Jacob, sorry, one sec. Jacob, I beg you mute your mic as well. As I would do it, because you men are new to this thing still. When you're not talking, just keep your mic on mute. So.
Sorry. Yeah, I haven't been doing that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, you might have to unmute your mic soonish, because I'm actually going to ask questions about things you said just to get more clarity. So what I did here was there's knife crime, and I heard the word Muslims and fueled by drugs. So that's interesting. If that was true, I would like to know, where have you seen this, that the knife crimes is being committed by mainly Muslims and it's fueled by drugs? What does it mean by fueled by drugs? That's one thing. And then I noticed that there was talking about the mayor being of Muslim faith, but he supports gay issues, and I think you were confused at why this is. I would like to know what the interest in that is, as in, like, if the man is being open, I don't know why that might necessarily bother you. That's interesting there. And then I guess you moved on to stop and search, and you guys, I think it was a good thing. And the question is, have you ever been stopped and searched yourself? So those are, if you can remember those three things, that's my question to you guys.
Can people hear me? Is that right?
Now we can.
Yeah, okay, all right. So I'll go first, unless Sam wants to cut me off and say something more insightful. No, I've never been stopped and searched, and yes, I know there's no argument that I can really make, sort of, as a white, being white, you can just say, well, you've never experienced it. Sort of, why should I get a say? So in that sense, I do have sympathy, in that I'm sure, it's a stress, and it's just, a complete kind of bother, and perhaps even traumatic to just be kind of harangued by officers, maybe, I don't know, for a particular ethnicity. So that's my answer to the first question. I don't know if someone else wants to come in, or shall I press on with the other two?
Go on, is anyone else, Sam, or anyone wants to jump in?
Sam,
on that?
I'll mute his mic for him still. Hey, Sam, unmute your mic, fam. You must know how to do it.
Is he new to the technology?
He's new to Anger still. Yesterday, man, he had to keep on jumping out and jumping back in every time we went to speak. I didn't know how to unmute the mic.
Hard times, bro.
Hey, Sam, press the button, man. Press the mic button. Tap your phone so the button shows up.
Wow.
And then press the mic button, and you're good.
Is he like in a busy place or something?
He's in a pub, getting thrashed.
Them ones, man. He's in a pub as well. Okay. Well, you know what? Maybe Jacob can carry on then if Sam's struggling with the technology.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first time as well. I thought I was going to make a complete fool of myself because I've never used Hangouts before, but it seems to be going all right so far. So, okay, so the other point was, what was the interest in Sadiq's Muslim faith and the issue with gays?
Yes. What was the interest?
What was the interest? So, it's not something that's, you know, when looking at Sadiq Khan, it's not kind of my major issue with him. But I think Sam was pointing out it's the somewhat sort of paradox between him, you know, that he does his faith is traditionally very sort of anti-homosexual and anti kind of gay issues in every sense of the word. So I think we were pointing out that it was just, you know, a slightly oxymoronic that he was a Muslim mayor who was making such an effort for LGBT advocacy within London. But you know, I mean that's not a problem. You know, if you want to list criticisms of Sadiq Khan, I don't think you can say, well, he's Muslim and he supports gays.
No, but it is a problem. So I'm back in the conversation now. It is a problem because there are parts of the Quran, and I can't cite them now because I don't recite the Quran, but I've got things at home, and I could specifically cite. And maybe it's worth having a conversation where it's actually got the text in which to do so. But the Quran is homophobic. The Quran is anti-feminism. The Quran is an oppressive ideology. Islam is an oppressive ideology. And I think that it's not to be a part of a progressive Western society. And Christianity, for example, of which we're allegedly a country of, Christianity is completely different to that. But I guess I wanted to answer Raven's question. So Raven's first question, as far as Raven, what was your first question?
So have you been stopped and searced yourself, Sam?
No, I've never been stopped and searched.
Okay,
never,
so that's one. The second one was, what was the intrigue about the gay support of the Mayor of London, which you've just articulated just then? And then the first question was knife. I think it was you who said that knife crime was fueled by drugs and is mainly Muslims who's contributing towards it. Is that a correct statement as you see it?
That's a correct statement. Yeah, that's what I believe to be the case. I mean, I was reading an article. I read an article in the Evening Standard, which was for me, I'm not going to say it was funny to read, but I read an article on the Evening Standard where everybody in the article, there were 4 people involved in the stabbing, and they were all called Muhammad.
Okay, so and you, like I said, so obviously someone like me has spent probably more time around knife crime and around trying to find solutions. I can tell you that it isn't fueled by drugs as I see it. Yeah, and as for being Muslim, there's many Muslims, Christians, atheists, Buddhists who do similar. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't say it's an exclusive to the Muslim community.
Can I?
But I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but that doesn't. Okay.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the things you're talking about at the moment, it seems quite alien to you, right? I'm telling you things that I live and breathe. So when you say stop and search, I have been stopped and search, and every one of my friends have been stopped and search. The 2 people on the panel who are pro stop and search have never been stopped and search. Fair enough. And then also you talk about knife crimes. And the perpetrators of these particular incidents. And I tell you that a big part of my work is around people who commit so-called knife crime, and I'm telling you that the majority of them are not Muslim.
Okay, so Raven.
Yes.
I think that there's, one of the reasons that I've not been stopped and searched is, 100%, I'll put my hands down on that, is because I'm white. However, I think that if you're from a community that is not privileged, then you're more likely to get involved in drug dealing, which I personally think that, cannabis should be legalized, because if we legalize cannabis, then less and less people in communities that are, how should we say, in communities like Brixton, for example, if you don't have the opportunity to get a job and then you turn to drug dealing, why do we think that is? It's because of the fact that drugs have been criminalized and prohibition. So I think if you decriminalize things like cannabis, for example, then there wouldn't be such a gateway to getting into drug dealing. And I think drug dealing is a really, really, really big part of the way in which people get involved in gang crime and then they're encouraged to carry a knife because you've got gang on gang mentality, whereby you've got somebody who's fighting against your area in which you're selling drugs. And I think that's a really big part of it.
No, not from what we see. No. Knife crime fueled by drug-related incidents isn't as organized as high as that. You're literally looking at petty rivalries that spill out in the streets for many reasons. And drugs could be one action, but isn't like a major thing really. Not from work I've done. Yeah, not but it seems to me out of the 3 questions I asked, 2 of them are connected to Islam, and the one I wanted to cover was the gay support by the mayor for the gay community. I would say, wouldn't that necessarily make him more in your kind of good books, because here is someone who is, according to you, has rules dictated to him by his faith, to which he is actually ignoring to cater for the wider London community when it comes to these gay issues. Wouldn't that be something that you think is actually an honourable thing, rather than something that's actually quite negative?
Well, that's the thing, Raven, is that I agree with Sadiq Khan on his acceptance of the fact that we are a progressive Western civilization. However, I find it very difficult to believe that somebody that adheres to an ideology that is an absolutist ideology, that is Islam, to believe that he's actually, willing to stand up and say, this is what I actually believe. And the thing within Islam that I'll mention now is taqiyya, and taqiyya which advocates for dishonesty in the interest of furthering one's own belief. And I think that Sadiq Khan is guilty of doing that. If not so, he's Muslim in name only. So he's not actually a Muslim. He doesn't adhere to Islam, because Islam is an absolutist. Islam, is an absolutist ideology. There's no compromise within Islam. And so there's no way in which somebody can say, okay, well, I agree with this, I agree with that. You either agree with all of it, you pray 5 times a day, you adhere to every single thing that's within the Quran, you adhere to the fact that Muhammad was the perfect man, or that's it, game over.
Right. So you said taqiyya, right? Isn't that something that is more so in the Shia sect of Islam? While I wasn't aware. Is Sadiq Khan a Shia? I wasn't aware.
Okay. Wait. Can I jump in here?
Go on then.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but the whole taqiyya thing, you're quite right, and I'm not pretending to be an expert on this, but it was originally used in Shia communities, because obviously the Shia have really, in all of history, been the Islamic minority. They've been dominated by the Sunnis, and so taqiyya was a sort of doctrine, if you like, that was developed by Shiites, and it said, yes, if you were sort of accosted by Sunni authorities, and you were at risk, your life was at risk, then you were permitted to lie to them, because you would be acting in defense. But from what I know, it seems to have spread more of a Islamic doctrine than a purely Shia doctrine. And so I think it does tend to be used, or at least sort of observed by some sects.
Right. So let me jump in there just to add to it. So would you say that the Mayor of London, when he's supporting gay issues, he is at fear of his life being in danger?
But you said,
who's this person? This is a pub person.
Hey Sam, you need to learn how to use the mute button, fam.
Oh, no, sorry guys. No, I just had it. Like, funnily enough, I just got a chap in the pub. He's from whereabouts are you from?
I'm from Kuwait.
There's a guy
Wait, we saying he overheard you talking all that Muslim crap?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I'll bring him in. So I'll quote verbatim what he says.
Okay. I see. There is no difference when you say hello to the Muslims here and they don't answer you.
Okay, stop. So he said, I see there's no difference between where I see Muslims here.
Oh, okay, cool. To the Muslims and they don't answer you. It's not the difference between Christianity and Islam. It's the differences between cultures.
Okay.
The culture.
I just want to say, big up to the pub Muslims. Big up the Muslims in the pub.
Religion has nothing to do with it.
And my friends say, big up to Muslims in the pub.
What did he say?
He said, "Big up to the Muslims in the pub." Yeah, okay, but I don't really even know where to go with that.
Well,
So,
I think
okay,
it's quite ironic because
no, all right, no. So Turkey. So let's talk. Okay,
ahead,
so
yeah.
Turkey was what we were talking about.
Go
So
ahead.
if we talk about Turkey, and
But I asked
everyone,
a specific question, didn't I?
oh, sorry, Raven, what was your question? Please
The
ask
particular
again.
question before your pub Islamic friend jumped in was that when do you feel that when the Mayor of London is at the gay parade and so forth, do you think he feels his life's in danger, so he has to lie in that particular act? Is that why you think he's practicing taqiyya?
No, I think that he's a Muslim in name only. I don't think he's he's actually a Muslim. I think that he, adheres to an ideology. I'm personally of the belief, and I've said this before, and I think I said it before we actually came in, Raven, is that I'm an anti-theist, and I think that individuals who subscribe to ideologies like Islam and Christianity are oppressed. And I think they're victims of the very ideologies that they subscribe to. So I think that the world would be a better place without religion, without Islam, without Sunni Shia, without Christianity, without everything, without Catholicism. We'd be a lot better off.
Right.
But also, though, just because your friend said something about like, oh, religion has nothing to do with it, it's only culture. I don't think we can deny, religion and culture surely are linked, at least in some way.
No, but culture is linked. But you've got to question the response of an individual whom I can see now drinking a pint of beer, who says that he adheres to Islam, because he doesn't.
Yeah, well, no, that's fine. I mean, great that he's found a way to sort of make Islamic and British way of life compatible.
What you saying, Zero?
Yo, is it cool if I respond for a couple of points?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, so there was a nice little kind of side diversion towards a really minuscule topic of taqiyya, but I want to leave that aside and touch upon the substantive issues in the center of this, and this what we're talking about here, or what this guy who was talking.
You got to beat your mic, mate, whoever that is.
Yeah. So what Samuel was saying in terms of content, what he's getting at is a confrontation between the quote-unquote West and Islam. Now, I was kind of doing something, so to make it a more interesting discussion, because he wasn't checked on anything, I'd offer him the opportunities to succinctly state his case of why this confrontation is occurring, and then I can jump back in so I don't misrepresent his arguments.
Oh, Samuel, come, man. You can do it, man. You can do it. Just tap the phone.
You still here?
Tap the phone so the mic button comes up, and press the mic button again, and you'll be able to talk so everybody can hear you. 2019, baby. Let's do it. Come on, fam. You don't have to leave the call every time you want to talk.
He might have an old phone, though, that doesn't have, like, touchscreen and stuff. I don't know.
No way. No way. How's he going to do Hangouts without no touchscreen?
I don't know, bro.
Hey, Sam, you're killing it, fam. Oh, man. Send me a screenshot of how your phone looks right now, man. Send me a screenshot of your phone so I can try and direct you what to do, man.
Might have snakes and ladders in there, innit?
Hey, Jacob, you're gonna have to speak on his behalf, man. Maybe you can understand his point of view.
Yeah, Jacob, why don't you advocate his case? Go on.
Hey, Jacob kept him moving. He didn't want no part of that. Yo. Oh, man, too.
You know, for me, what gets me is how critics of Islam are so insistent on a particular version of Islam to be the true and only Islam. If you get what I'm saying, like critics of Islam will generally, and it was exhibited by Samuel earlier, where he said, "Look, if you don't agree to all of these things, then you're not a Muslim." And then he went straight to like a ritual which is agreed upon by Sunnis and Shias, and not what he was talking about, which ultimately is political Islam. I think Jacob came back. So do you wanna advocate for the case of the clash? Take that as a no.
Yo, Jacob, take your mic off mute, fam.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. Hello.
Sorry,
Sorry, I was like, I got disconnected for like the last sort of minute or so of conversation, so I don't really know what.
Let me put it like this:
someone wants to rehash.
Why don't you put forward the case of why it is there's a seemingly imminent clash between the West, quote unquote, and Islam?
Hey guys, I'm back.
All right, then you do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear the question. I keep having a problem where I get.
So he's saying what's the why is there what's the clash between Islam and Western culture? So do you want me to respond or Sam?
Yeah,
can respond?
very succinct.
No, I can respond. You know, I guess I'll comment first. So I think that the clash between Western society and Islam is the fact that in the UK we live in a progressive society. I fundamentally believe that gay people should be able to marry each other. They should be able to have children. I think that we should be accepting of people who are transgender. I think that we should be accepting of people who aren't Muslim as well. And if you actually look at Islam, for example, if you actually look at the Quran, they are fundamentally non-accepting of the very things that I've just spoken about. And what I don't understand about...
Hold on. No. Hold on a sec. So the point is or one of the points are, you feel there's a clash or tension between progressive values of the West and Islam.
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to add another point to that now, or kind of?
Okay. Yeah. So I'd like to add feminism, for example. So I'm personally of the belief that women should have, women should have the right to vote. Women should have the right to get a job. They should have the right to do whatever they want. And Islam fundamentally disagrees with that standpoint.
Okay,
within Islam,
no,
within
wait,
allow
hold
me,
on.
no, allow me to finish. Within Islam,
point,
no, let me finish, then I'll let you.
To substantiate the point of how it is exactly that, quote unquote, fundamentally, Islam disagrees with women working, having their own money, and so on and so forth, or getting an education.
Well, why is it? So why is it?
No. Don't ask me a question. Substantiate your assertion.
Okay, so this is, as I said earlier, I have quotes from the Quran at home. I don't recite them off by heart, but I've got quotes from the Quran that could support my argument. That,
for example,
effectively,
I've got one which maybe Zurab you'd like to respond to. I don't know.
Go for it, Jacob. Go for it.
So, for example, in Sharia law, a woman's testimony in a court of law being worth half that of a man's.
So, do you want to reference the verse you're talking about?
I'm looking it up now. So give me 30 seconds or a minute, something.
I think it has a space in the Hadith rather than in the Quran. I'm not sure. I need to.
Okay, and so the question becomes: is this a general rule or is it a specific rule? And then the second question will be: is the jurist's understanding of this kind of point of law something which is static or evolving? And the quick answer to that, as with all of these jurisprudential issues, is that they are subject to, they're not static. Things which are static are fundamental precepts like Tawheed, like unity of God, like all Muslims agree on prayer and fasting, that you have to actually do them, and so on and so forth. These are established principles, right? Simply put, you have the rituals, the 5 rituals, outward forms, and then you have the things which you subscribe to in terms of belief in the unseen as a Muslim. But when it comes to jurisprudential issues, these are not static and they're not rooted in a way which cannot be. So for an example, I would point towards an institution in Morocco which was financed and then later went on to become Al-Qayrawan University, or the traditional center of learning in Morocco. So, and I mean, before all of that, from the very get-go, you have someone like Aisha who teaches people and relates narrations and is an active member of society. So whether it is we go back to the very beginning or come to quote unquote like thinkers in the contemporary time, you can see that it's a nuanced issue and a balanced issue, and not a fringe view, which you seem to hold to be the only true Islam.
I mean, I don't hold that, but I'm not wanting to sort of try and pick holes in this argument, because I'm ignorant certainly about a lot of stuff in Islam, and so maybe I'm open to being informed. But as far as I know, Sharia is divine law. It's God's law, which stands in opposition to the other man-made law, and the whole women's testimony thing being a part of divine law suggests that it's less a matter of sort of this scholar, this sort of legalist believes this,
guys,
that it's God. So I don't know what you'd say to that.
Guys, I don't want to interrupt this here, but I feel like the topic is shifting slightly. I mean, you're now saying you're now kind of saying stuff about Sharia, and I'm instantly thinking that we have plenty of countries that adhere to Sharia that also exist under other legal frameworks like the Geneva Convention. We've got lots of charters that we all adhere to. So I'm not sure that's the argument, but can we possibly get it back onto the topic if possible? Because I came into this.
No, you're right for doing that still. I'm gonna do everybody who ain't spoken yet. I'll make you go one at a time, open up your mic and give your points of view on knife crime and stop and search in it, because that's the main topic still. So yeah, scarcity, I mean, he ain't here yet still. Dan or Shaka, you man, open up your mic and say your thing in it.
Yeah, I suppose I can come through. I mean, my position, I think I'm open, obviously, because I've come into a discussion with people who probably think different things. So I haven't got a particularly firm position. I suppose there's issues with. I mean, if we go back to stuff like sus laws, it sort of leads into discussions on racial profiling. The knife crime issue sort of again ties into these moral panics that seem to sort of manifest every generation or so. I mean, we've had people have mentioned like the razor gangs in Glasgow. I think we also had razor gangs in London not long after the war. I'm not sure how effective stop and search is, because it seems to just be what's the word? It seems to be deployed when it's most needed, i.e. when there's been a particularly sort of noticeable spike in knife crime, and it's not something that's sort of, how do we say it, we haven't got a consistent approach to it. It just seems as and when there's a panic, we instantly start talking about stop and search, as if that's somehow solved the problem in the past, and I'm unaware of it having done so. So yeah, other background, I studied geography, so social sciences. I've also studied gang culture in virtual space. I'm pretty well read on gangs in London and Manchester, Birmingham, etc. So yeah, that's the angle I'm coming at it from. Big up.
I was gonna say that as well. Still, what does man even think about spending like the amount of time that man dedicate into how to remedy knife crime, or how to manage it, basically, in terms of stop and search? That's
but Nas, right? Like, Nas,
to me, that's like just managing it, but it's not really getting
Leon,
to the.
can I say something
in the first place? You get me? Before you do, Sam, though, I wanna hear Shakara speak still, because he ain't said nothing yet, and he's one of the main guys that I really want to have on the panel.
Well, can I just address Nas? I'll do it quickly, because what Nas said, I think, is particularly relevant. Because
and also after you do that, check your WhatsApp, because I send you a screenshot of how to manage the microphone in the car. You definitely need to mute when you ain't talking, because you got the most background noise.
Sorry, bro. But the thing that Noah said is that I personally agree with him that stop and search is particularly punitive against certain groups, and I think that we can all agree that the way in which you should approach stop and search is to not stop a black man or black and minority ethnic individual as they're walking out of a tube station, because we all know the people in our areas that are selling drugs, that are criminals, that are doing the things that they shouldn't be doing. We all know them, because me last night, and I'm guilty of it as well, because I buy hash from somebody on Edgware Road, and only time we'll walk past him, he's like, oh, hash, weed, coke, or like any of these things. And I think that perhaps what we should do is we should target people who are actively involved in gangs and are so obviously involved in gangs, rather than just saying, okay, well, I'll stop a black guy or a minority ethnic person that's walking out of a tube station.
Yeah, I mean, I can respond to that. I don't know if Shakara wants to come in first. Sam, I'm Dan, by the way. It's as easy as now, but yeah. I mean, again, I think perhaps, what constitutes an active gang member, I think it's very, very hard to pin that down. You could say with the current dynamic of gangs, the most active gang members in like a London-based gang won't be active in London. They'll be sent to Northampton, or they'll be sent to somewhere in Bedfordshire, or they'll be sent to Hertfordshire somewhere. This is the county line phenomena. So it's for a gang especially that's under OBO, as it's called by the police. If they're a known gang, let's say they've got X amount of videos out there, their names ringing bells all corners of London and the UK. It makes sense for them to operate outside of London. I mean, not very recently, you had a gang, several gangs actually. There was a big sweep in Lambeth, and they picked up a bunch of people from it's about three different estates, or maybe four in southwest London. There's a gang called LTH, Lower Tulse Hill. A lot of them guys got nicked. Also for operating out of town. There was also Stockwell, ABM, M Block, whatever you want to call it. Loads of those guys got nicked, and loads of Brixton Hill, or 6-7, also got nicked. Now the interesting thing there is that all of these gangs are allied. Those gangs in particular, in that particular sweep, they were allied, which is interesting because it creates a kind of power vacuum dynamic on the street where if you have warring gangs, you have warring factions, and you can pretty much divide Brixton up sort of Lambeth, you can divide it fairly neatly into two sides. So what's happened there, you've essentially made one side weaker, shall we say, by busting one side of the problem when you haven't busted their enemies, if that makes sense. So you have all these other interesting dynamics that play out on the street level. The police are aware of it, the gang members are aware of it, and the gang members are able to, I suppose, react to the increased scrutiny as and when. They're fairly reflexive, So yeah, that's my point.
I mean, I'd sort of want to respond to that, but I understand that people have been waiting a long time to get involved, so I'll just stay quiet and then maybe come back to that later.
Yeah, cool, man.
Yeah, yeah, blessings everyone on the panel. Yeah, I'm here for you content because right now, yeah, like I have a bit of a disdain for debating certain people or certain issues. I'm not gonna lie about you.
But you see, my thing is the reason I come and wanted you on here still, and with the diverse panel. I know your thing already. You straight in-house business you're dealing with. You get me? But my thing is right. We all exist on the same patch here, and whether we like it or not, we're gonna have to interact with each other one way or the other.
Yeah, man's cool with that. I'm just saying though, like to me, right. This is before I get into the answers of the question.
Yeah.
Like by right, see, I'm like I said, I'm here for you in it, so I'm engaging because I know what you're on in it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I respect for what man's on, and I have appreciation for what man's on. Like man's gonna deal with it, but like little things, like I'm not even a Muslim, but when I hear people talking about Sadiq Khan and Muslim knife crime, I think it's a joke. You see what I'm saying? Like we're living in London, fam. White people are stabbing each other and shooting each other, and you know what I'm saying, all kind of thing. Like why don't white people talk about crime in the white community? You know what I'm saying? Like I've yet to see
talking about those shacks because you got a perspective that's unique from what everybody does, in it, from their own point of view. Everyone sees the world through their own lens. You get me? But
I hate you.
When messages are out there in mainstream or in their own little stream, it only goes to those people that who it can reach. You get me? So it has an influence on society in general, and that affects everybody in the society, whether we section ourselves off or not. You get me? So
I get it, bro.
Rather than getting the second-hand information about what we should and shouldn't be aware of from somebody who we may or may not trust, or we ain't got no option. We have to air everything second-hand. I'm saying let's directly just have that conversation. As long as it's respectable, if it can be done, why not? That's my thing, innit?
Def King, and that's why I said I'm hearing it, because man understands the thing in it, so man's respecting what the man is dealing with, innit? But yeah, I just feel like for me, when it comes to the issue of stop and search and knife crime, first and foremost, that whatever is happening within the Black community are issues that only we can solve within our communities. As the advocacy of things like stop and search, to me, are just attempts to further criminalize the Black community, and I can say that based upon, you know, at least 40 years of evidence of the fact that stop and search does not solve crime, it does not reduce crime in the Black community, but it does contribute to the further criminalization, especially of the younger generation, especially of the men of the younger generation within our community. And this has been going on since the 70s up until now. So we don't really need any, there's no new research, you know what I'm saying, that's going to bring out anything new, you know what I'm saying? We know this, yeah? And what we need to do is organize as a community to solve those problems. The police can't solve that problem. And to be honest with you, the police don't have the wherewithal to solve the problem, even if they had the intention, because the police have been unable to overcome their own biases. If the police was not an institution, it might be, you know, reasonable to suggest that more stop and search might solve, you know, knife crime in the Black community. That might be reasonable if it wasn't for the fact that we know, yeah, that the police have not been able to overcome, you know, or purge themselves of certain institutional biases. So I don't understand it. We are unduly harassed. We've suffered police brutality more than any other community. We die in custody more than any other community, disproportionately. So this idea that we, you know, should just be trusting of the police to be able to administer their duties according in a professional manner is nonsense. So the reality is the only solution, the only option that we have is to take the situation in hand ourselves and deal with it. And finally, I'm going to reiterate the fact that I don't think anybody who's not African has the moral authority to tell African people how we should deal with that issue, especially because, you know, there are high rates of domestic violence in the white community. I never hear white people come out and talk about, well, why don't we solve domestic violence in our community? You know,
but this is the thing though, cause I don't even think I heard him talk about solving it. He was more of a thing of like I said, we all affected by what everybody's doing in the same little patch that we're in. You get me? So his thing is raw. Just obviously.
Can I come in with something?
I get that, you know, but then also
I'm saying
hate crime.
He might not be empathetic. I don't want to speak for him because I don't know how to unmute his mic and he's sending me messages in the back. But it might be a thing of, because this is an argument I've heard before, in it, like man ain't necessarily empathetic to the plight of the black man where we're hurting each other. But that's like there's violence happening in the area that they're close to, and they don't want to walk down the street. They want to see something done with that, in it. So in terms of raw, they just don't want violence on the inside. More police, whatever it is.
But this is my thing, innit? Because it kind of feeds into the conversation that we were having yesterday, yeah, about why don't we deal with the corrupt leaders, innit, and them kind of thing there. And all I'm saying is, yeah, like there is evidence, statistical evidence, yeah, from the Met Police that people are calling to do stop and search, that hate crimes committed by white youths have risen, yeah, in the last few years, especially since Brexit. I am not hearing an outcry from the white community speaking to their all this stuff about Jedi and how wonderful and the moral standing of Jedi because of what he's doing. I am not hearing the moral outcry from the white community, yeah, campaigning to the white community about the fact that, listen, we need to stop these hate crimes among the white community. Yeah, we need to stop this right now. What's going on? Yeah, I'm not hearing it. There are high rates, yeah, of crime in the white community. I'm not hearing any campaigns of, you know what I'm saying, against drugs, the drug trade and the violence that it causes among white people. Alcoholism, yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Like,
alcoholism.
These people drink.
Serious problem.
Serious things.
Amongst
yeah,
white
you know what I'm saying.
The sister.
Over alcoholism.
Exactly. I'm not hearing it in it. So I that's what I want to know. Like, where is the responsibility coming from white people and the narrative? You know, you get me? Where is it?
NHS is balling because of white people and their alcohol problem.
Jacob, yeah,
Can I answer some of your points?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Feel free.
So, okay, so one of your sort of central assertions, you know, kind of, you know, I understand, you know, it seems sort of indignant, you know, why should anyone who's not part of sort of, I don't know, the Black British, or if you want to just say general Black African community, you know, why should we have any say over, you know, who on what grounds do we dictate to you kind of what should be going on in this specific community when we've got no part of it? So my point to that is, you know, we don't have the right to interfere in just, you know, the lives of any sort of African on the globe, but so long as you're living within the British realm, then it is the job of whoever's in charge of the British state to you know to dictate to some extent to people how they behave, and that includes everyone who's living as a British citizen. Where, you know, we'll get whatever color you are. And at times, I'm sure it does seem like it's more sort of intrusive, like, you know, as if there's a sort of war on the black man from the British government, whatever it is. But I don't think you can say, you know, I'm interested to hear sort of when you say, oh, there's no sort of moral authority. You know, what about the authority of, you know, of the state to protect its citizens, which I think is one of the few jobs of the state that's actually legitimate.
May I interject?
What's your name?
May I interject?
What's your name, sir? The person that's speaking. What's your name?
My name's Jacob.
Jacob. Okay. Are you a politician, Jacob?
Am I a politician? No, not yet.
So you're not a member of the cabinet. You're not a member of the House of Parliament, Commons, House of Lords, nothing like that. No.
No. No.
No. Okay. I didn't think I was speaking to a member of the government. You know what I'm saying, or anything like that. I was not aware of that. Anybody else on the panel that's a member of the government, please say aye. Okay.
Hang on.
So I understood it. We're having a conversation, yeah, via Hangouts among just ordinary people. Yeah. So I'm not talking to people that that are in a position of authority in terms of government. And it is a good point that you made, which I'll probably come back to it later. But the fact of the matter is, these are ordinary white people that feel that when it comes to black people and crime, yeah, one of the key things that you seem to want to advocate for is stop and search. Yeah, it's a nonsense.
I wouldn't say anything that I'm advocating. It's perhaps one number on the list of you know of measures of which there are bigger priorities for me.
All right. Well, if there were bigger priorities, it suggests to me that they should have come up in the conversation by now. Because this is the first time I'm speaking, and I ain't heard the bigger priorities come up yet.
Well, I mean, we haven't really touched on them. If you want to go on to now and slightly divert topic, then we can do that if you want.
When you consider... if it's a bigger priority, how is it diverting the topic?
Okay. So, I would say I know I did mention this before. I think this was before you joined, but I said just as a general, this is, you know, kind of not accounting for race so much, but one measure of sort of preventative crime would be to just have not necessarily greater police numbers, but just have more officers, you know, patrolling the streets to act as a sort of, you know, rather than acting after a crime has already been committed and behaving like you know the fire department, like a response unit, just to patrol the streets, you know, and ideally stop crime, you know, because police can't unburgle your house, and they can't uncommit a murder. And we have so many positions, and I think you probably agree with me on this. There's too much bureaucracy at the top, you know, because you've got chief superintendents and superintendent and chief deputy inspector, whatever, you know, just more ordinary constables who are normal people like you and I, and are not so sort of friendly with the government, who are like I say, a preventative measure. That would be high on my list, not just as a issue, you know, regarding the black community, but as an issue regarding to crime. So I don't know how you feel about that.
Can I say something? Sorry, sir.
No.
Hi. First off, good evening. Like it's my first time on the chat like this.
Hello.
What you're saying sounds a lot like. Do you remember the film Minority Report, where they were predicting crimes before they were happening? And it's like
pre-crime.
It's a fantasy ideal where if you think that a police presence in a community that already doesn't trust the police is going to make a difference, it's not. Yesterday I was out with my wife and our car was broken into outside of a police station. The police mean nothing in urban areas, and it will continue to be that way because the image and the experience is that you don't really give a damn. They don't give a shit about our situations, the reasons why crimes are committed, because everything has a reason. Everything has to have a background to it. And a lot of it is to do with the haves and the have-nots. So to say that the increase of regular constables on the beat, as they call it, would change something, I can't agree with that.
It worked in the 60s, though. It absolutely worked in the 60s when you had fewer numbers of officers then than you do now, and it did work. Crime, it just prevented. Now your point is not invalid. It's very, I agree with you. The police today, I think, are completely shambolic, and they're not what they were in the 60s. But that's a point to address regard to the institution of the police, not to the organization of individual constables. So I don't think that's what you said is a point against my.
No, I can't agree with that, because when was the Brixton riots? I think
1981.
Say it again.
The Brixton riots in 1981.
It was 1981. All right, then.
Not in Hill was 1958.
That's the one. Thank you, brother. Because that was due to increased police there.
But the funny thing is, he said that in the 1960s it worked. I'll tell you who it didn't work for. My grandfather.
and mine, and my dad, and my uncle, and my aunt.
The police weren't saving my grandfather from skinheads and teddy bears. You get me?
Right. No, I'm not. But I'm not. I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm sorry for that. That's bad. I'm not saying yes, and it worked, and you were able to just, there were no criminals back then. But if we're talking, general statistics, of course, I'm sure, awful stuff still happened. There were thugs then, and there were racists then, just as there are now. But whatever you do in the police isn't going to change that. But I'm talking about the overarching effect, and I wonder, do you still sort of dismiss that in its entirety?
Certainly, as a black community, we've never been protected by the police in this country. There's been no time since the so-called Windrush era that we've been under protection of the police. We've only been under attack by the police and criminalized by it.
See, it's funny that you say that, because that's the way that I feel now. I feel like, what are the police doing for me? I don't feel particularly sort of represented and privileged on.
Under siege by Muslim gangs.
Sorry, say again.
Because you feel under siege.
I feel sorry.
Gangs.
Yeah, in the 60s, the police had us under manners.
Well, that's not the only reason, but that's not even. I wouldn't say.
My point to you is, that when it comes to crime, all right.
Yes.
White people commit more crime against white people than so-called Muslims are committing against white people. Yeah. So if you're concerned about crime, address that.
Right.
But
my original measure actually was specifically detached from all sort of ethnic and religious and racial and whatnot, and was about crime in general. So the Muslim issue was a separate point that was under discussion earlier. That's not my main sort of thesis here.
I'm gonna pause you, man, for a minute. We've got Joe on the panel still, online wipe in the building. So, what you say? You wanna contribute? Anything you wanna say?
What's up, Leon? You alright? Peace. Yeah, I don't know. A couple of things going. I don't know. Someone said something about the violence is to do with the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I don't know where this idea came from that morals cost you money. I don't know where this idea come from that stop and search criminalizes black people. I don't know where that
That
comes
was,
from.
sorry to interrupt you, but that was myself. And it's not about morals. It's about the literal fact that the majority of the places that these crimes are being committed in are black impoverished areas. That's what the haves and have-nots are. There are plenty of places where you will have rundown council estates across the road from multi-million-pound houses. That is almost a taunt in the face of those who are living on nothing to those who are living well above.
Yeah, exactly. You've just put it on the onus that the poor people don't have morals, and I'm telling you, morals do not cost you money. If you think being poor is an excuse to go out stealing and robbing and stabbing people, it's not true. That's moral. That's a bankruptcy of morals.
That's not what I have said. So please don't.
No, that's exactly what you said.
Me.
You said you put the onus on the poor people, saying looking over at rich people as if that's some sort of excuse to behave immorally. And I'm telling you, it's wrong.
It's no one's disputing what is right and wrong. What I am saying is that the fact that you can have that type of a mentality that it's all right to put those who are suffering and have nothing across from, it's like eating a plate of food across from a starving African child. That's what it is.
No one is starving in this country. There's poverty in this country is nothing like the starvation of Africa. There's no comparison.
Poverty is
Stop
relative.
being ridiculous.
Poverty is relative. Poverty is relative. You cannot say that because you're poor here.
Okay, so why are we talking about poverty
you're not
when we're
poor
talking about knife
You're
crime?
Poor is poor.
Unless you think being poor is an excuse for it.
It's not an excuse. It is a reason why.
Oh, good. So it's not. So it's irrelevant to the conversation. Then we can move on to something else.
Pardon? Sorry, repeat that again.
So it's irrelevant to the conversation. Then we can move on to something else.
Relevant. It's extremely relevant. And if you cannot see that, you're blinkered.
Well, hang on. I'm saying to you that morals do not cost you money, right? You're suggesting that poverty is an excuse for knife crime.
No, I am saying it is a reason why it happens. I'm not saying it is an excuse. I'm saying it's a reason.
Well, that's actually there is an issue here, in that. So I don't know if what this is like for the UK, but in the US, the correlation between violent crime and between poverty is actually very weak. If there is a correlation, it's very weak. I think it could be argued that there's none at all in the US.
How so? If you live in an impoverished area, how can that not relate to the reason why crimes are committed?
Well, we can talk reasons in a bit, but do you want me to get up the numbers?
Please do, yeah.
Hang on, I was working on. Just give me a sec. You carry on.
While he's doing that, can someone explain to me how stop and search criminalizes black people again? Because I don't quite get that one either.
It's not that it criminalizes it; it targets black people.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't.
If it's happening in the majority of black areas, how is that not targeting black areas?
Could you provide me some statistics that it's happening in the black areas?
So, for example, it's gone out of my head now. But the fact of the matter is, there we go. A few years ago, I'm forgetting the year, so forgive me. One, first of all, yeah, 77% or something like that of the DNA database, yeah, consists of young black men. Yeah, sorry, young black men consist of 77%. 70% of young black men, yeah, are on the DNA database. Yeah, that's one thing. Second thing is that we're more likely to be stopped and searched. Yeah, I think something in the
that's not true. That's not true.
Well, it is. These are
no, I'm telling you.
I've been published in numerous newspapers. So what are you talking about? Yeah, from the Voice to the Daily Mail, that we are 20-something times more likely to be stopped and searched.
If you slow up, I'll explain it to you.
1 second, please.
Hey, Joe. So one sec. Give the man a chance to explain his argument, and then you can rebut him in it when he's finished.
Thank you. Yeah, let's have some behavior. And the ultimate evidence is the disproportionate rates of black people that are in the prison system. Despite the fact that we don't commit crime at any higher rate than any other community.
Right, you done?
I am.
Right. On the stop and search, black people are not disproportionately stop and searched. only if you measure it against population statistics, which is not how you measure stop and search. There was a study by the West Midland Police, right? And they compared stop and search figures to populations actually available on the street to be stop and searched, right? So what I mean by that is you don't check stop and search statistics against the population of that area, because the people available on the street are not representative of the population. For example, you don't catch many 80-year-old women hanging around on street corners. They're not going to be liable to be stopped and searched, right? So they did a study on it, and it proves that populations actually available on the street to be stopped and searched matches that here or there, plus or minus a few digits here and there, with the population, right?
Sorry, you're saying that this is a study done in West Midlands, yeah?
By the West Midlands Police at the Home Office that was buried because it's...
So what
the
was
Home Office isn't in the West Midlands.
No, it was conducted by the West Midlands Police.
Where? Upon who? People in the West Midlands?
And I've got the... If you can check out one of my videos, it's got the study there and it's got the details. There was 3 areas, and it was I can't remember the exact areas, but it includes obviously black population.
Not representative of the population either. That cannot make for correct statistics.
Okay, well, you can't have
100% truth unless you do 100% population.
You point to me the study that measures every single district in the country. There isn't one.
There isn't one at all.
There isn't one, right?
Agree.
But you're telling me that stop and search statistics that are based on population figures, which isn't a fair way to represent.
All right,
is it?
I can go by my own personal experience, and I've never committed a crime.
Oh yeah, because good anecdote is as good as data.
Several times as a black man.
Yeah, because anecdote is as good as data. Isn't it?
I used to own my own business in central London, running nightclubs. And the police used to stop and search me as I was on my way in a suit to my venues.
What does that prove?
To you?
What does that prove? For all we know, the same police officer
statistics from the London Mayor's Office. Statistics from the London Mayor's Office that were published earlier this year say that black people make up 15.6% of London's population, whilst white people make up 59.8%. In 2018, 43% of searches were of black people, while 35% were of white people, according to official figures from the London Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime.
Right, and I've just said to you that that's not a good way to measure stop and search figures, is it? Because it's better to measure them on against populations actually available on the street.
What you say to me then is that black people. What you say to me then is that black people are on road at disproportionate rates, and that's why we're stopped and searched more.
Well, I would suggest to you, if you look at population, if you take the 2011 census, right? I think white British is 45%. This is in London. White British is 45% of the population, right? And that's amongst all ages, right? And as we know, the demographic of the country is changing. So if you reduce that to ages that are more likely to be stopped and searched, like say 12 and 22, just for example, right? That percentage is going to be even higher, right? So yes, they are going to be disproportionately represented out on the street as compared to the population of the rest of the country.
Does what you just said even make sense to you?
Well, of course it does, because I've thought about these things.
Maybe I'll
listen. Okay, I'll
slow
it down. I'll slow it down. We take it step by step. Stop me if you get confused, right? The 2011 census, right, has it that London is 45% white British, 55% every other ethnicity, right? Okay?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is accounting for all age groups, from babies to old ladies, okay? We know that the demographics of the country are changing. It's becoming less white, right? So how does it get less white? It means the younger people are less white, right? So if the entire population of London is 45% white, If you just take the age bracket of, say, something like 12 to 22, we know that would be bigger than 45%. We don't know. I don't know the exact figures, but we can be certain that it's bigger than 45%.
So what you're saying to me?
Sorry. Can I interject?
I need to clarify something. Are you suggesting? Let's just use London as an example. Are you suggesting to me that there are more black youth in London than white youth?
Well, not. It depends. There's more. The white will be probably a majority minority. So it's a minority. It's a minority now, but it's probably the biggest. I don't know the exact breakup of the figure. I'm just giving you that example as a 20%.
You're saying that white youth are a minority in London.
No, I said they're a majority minority, which means they are the biggest single category, but they are a minority compared to everyone else. 45% would make them a minority compared to everyone else, but they are the biggest single category.
We're talking about black people. So this thing breaks down why they're
why they're
hold on, please.
In the figures.
But my point is that we're not comparing white people, to all quote unquote ethnic minorities, We're talking about black, white at the moment. So it breaks down black, white, Asian, and other. So I'm trying to find a justification. I'm really trying, with you, like I'm trying to be patient, Trying to find a justification.
No, you're not, mate. No, you're not.
I really am. I really am.
Really.
Sorry. Let me just land this. So sorry. Online whiteboard Joe. I don't know what's easiest to describe. Can I? You came on since I was making a cup of tea. Could you just clarify your point? I heard something about anecdotes and data, and I wanted to jump at my computer, but I don't know if you can just summarize your position briefly.
Basically, young black kids are not overrepresented in stop and search statistics if you compare it to populations available on the street as opposed to population statistics as a whole.
So basically, we're on road more. That's how we get stop and search more.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is the non. You see what I'm saying? Content, This is the nonsense.
Okay, let me.
Hold on. Sorry. Is that from any sort of? Because you mentioned the 2011 data census. So I'm imagining that you've sort of you've got some.
There was a study conducted on this. There was a study conducted on this.
And what the conclusion? And the conclusion was that young white boys in London stay at home more.
That's what I'm saying. At home doing their homework, reading book, and watching Dragon Ball Z and that.
No, hold on. Sorry, Shaka. I haven't heard your discussion, so I'm just trying to get a pin in it. But hang
on. Is Shaka just going to do this whole mischaracterization thing all night, right? Because I can do something else. If he doesn't want to talk about real stuff, he just wants to, play silly buggers. I can go about my evening. Who said? I missed
that. Come again. Am I going to do what, sorry?
If you're just going to play silly buggers, I can go about my evening. I didn't say nothing about no white kids doing their homework and playing Dragon Ball Z, right? If you want to talk seriously about it, we talk seriously. We're
having an adult conversation. I made a sarcastic comment. If you can't handle it, then you can duck. But I mean, there's no reason to get in, in a twist about it. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm just telling you.
Right, then chill out, relax with it, take it off, you know what I mean? And ease. You know what I'm saying? Have a pint, mate. Have a pint. All right.
All right. So I mean, is there any data to back up that point that you made, John?
Yes, a study's been conducted. If you check out on my channel, it's got a whole video showing this in more detail.
Don't plug. Come on, don't plug. I do watch your channel. I'm already subbed. But if you've got, if you could put it in the back chat, if there's an article or whatever, I don't mind going over it while we're talking, sort of thing.
Well, check, like I say, all the links are on the description. If you know my channel,
I'll have a look.
Just look out Stop and Search Debunked. All right.
And while you're at it, could you provide statistics of the length of time that black youth spend on the streets as in comparison to white youths?
No.
Okay. So how are we supposed to verify this idea about
read the study?
No.
Read the study.
But you've read it.
You will know.
But you've read it and you're citing it as evidence.
Sorry. Just to land again. Sorry to get in between you guys. I've just literally clicked that link, West Midlands Police-pcc.gov.uk. The PDF, the link looks like it's all in one piece, but 404 not found. So that article is no longer available.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And hold on, it also says that study was from 2000 and used 1991 census data.
So basically,
That's the one. This is why I didn't want to jump in. But I'm aware of that one, not no recent one.
Hang on, they've never used that study is from 2001, but they didn't use census data. It measured its own population.
Yeah, but it would have used. I mean, any sort of population data comes from the census.
No. For the measurement of population, they sent cameras through the streets, right? Because the whole point of the study was that they wasn't measuring it against the stop and search statistics against population figures. They were measuring it against populations available on the street. So they may have used census data, yes, but the statistics were used for a population available
and then
on the
they
street.
extrapolated from that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try and find the original.
The only way this makes sense here is if we can verify that black people or black youth or young black men or whatever, or any kind of demographic in the black community actually spend more time on the road, on the streets than any other community. That's the only way this makes sense. And I don't know how anybody can justify that.
Well, let's do a little thought experiment.
The issue I have is that we seem to be ignoring the fact that all of these stop and search, the majority of these stop and searches are happening in black areas. It's not happening everywhere. See, therefore, you're not going to get it's targeting. You cannot go into one.
So what you're saying is if you go to an area with a higher black population,
one person and then think it's all going to work, it doesn't work that way. The fact is, we are.
Have you got any?
Irrespective of what the figures say.
Right, hold on, lads. Right, I've just got that. I've got the article up. I went to the Wayback Machine. Big up to the web archive, and I've pulled it up. So I'm looking at it now, and I'm gonna jump back in a sec.
All right, have a look. By the way, what I started a minute ago was 2018, 2019. Yeah, so that's within the last year, really. Yeah, so that's all I got.
All right, so I'm going to read out the methodology, so it should make sense. So, a methodology was developed for this study involving the following key elements. The first, identification of hotspots or zones within each of 5 study sites where most stop and searches take place. The second point, obtaining profile information of the available pedestrian and vehicle populations within the specified zones using video cameras, as you said, and observers situated in vehicles driven within the zones. Comparing these available population profiles with
how many people talking here?
I'll get there. And those stopped and searched. And the last point is for 2 of the 5. Romy, wait, mate. I'm reading out a methodology.
All right.
5th point in. For 2 of the 5 sites, comparing the distribution of crimes with the distribution of stops and searches and exploring reasons for any differences. So, how useful? I could get into this. I'm gonna summarize, but I mean, yeah, that's essentially the methodology. So it's not based on.
Why don't you read the summary?
What you mean, the abstract?
At the end.
Or at the beginning, they sometimes put it at the beginning.
I know, I read the abstract, but I'm saying it at the end.
No, that was a methodology. There might be a conclusion. I'll read the conclusion. I'll read the conclusion.
And why is it right? If you see anything that gives actual statistics in terms of available population on the streets and breaks it down by race, I'd love to hear it.
Sure.
Yeah, because God forbid you should bother looking at it.
Okay, so it looks like they looked at it seems like they looked at Chapeltown, I'm guessing, which is Leeds, and Central Leicester. Geographical patterns of stop searches. All right, this is my bag. In this final empirical chapter, we take a look at geographical patterns of stops and searches and compare them with patterns of crime. This comparison allows us to explore whether the varying levels of stops and searches between different places are, in a sense, justified by the differing levels of crime in these places. Furthermore, where apparent disparities are seen to exist, it allows us to explore whether such disparities contribute unnecessarily to levels of disproportionality. Right. Second, this is a key point. In order to carry out this comparison, we used GIS software, which is Geographical Information System software to map crime records from 2 of the study sites, Chapeltown and Central Leicester, at police beat level, and compared them with pilot records of stops and searches. The data for the same time period were compared whenever possible. Analysis was restricted to those 2 sites, blah, 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 blah. We analysed all the crime data provided for Central Leicester. This comprised around 40,000 records covering Central Leicester for the period November 99 to 2000, of which just over 8,000 applied to the central area. This is the same period. Yeah, I mean, is this really useful to, like, 2019?
Yeah, is there any allusions to race?
This seems to be sort of okay. So the beat with search levels that are higher than would be predicted from the rates of crime also have a high percentage of Black and Asian local residents. Well, I think that's maybe going against what you said, Joe. 17% and 29% Black, and 20% and 30%. That's Chapeltown and Leicester there. By contrast, the 3 beats just to the north and the beat just to the south, that all have a disproportionately low level of searches, have on average a disproportionately low number of Black and Asian residents at 4% and 7% respectively. Analysis of the available population in these beats provides similar supporting evidence to suggest that the areas where a disproportionately high number of searches relative to crime levels are areas with high numbers of Black and Asian people.
That's exactly going against what he said.
Did you read the article, Joe?
My man tried it fully. He tried it hard.
Because the article got taken down, but I'm reading it, and then, like, I mean, I studied geography at uni. This is talking specifically about geographical patterns. So we don't, within geography, we tend not to look at, the sort of softly social justice sort of stuff. We just look at the place, the space, the place, and who lives in the space. And then you can put various figures on top. But I know Chapeltown fairly well. If you were to tell me that they search a lot more people in Chapeltown than they do in I don't know, Headingley or somewhere, I'd probably believe it.
Why?
This is the other thing. But no, I'd also say, Joe, are you denying that stop and searches take place? Do you think there's like a method to the stops, or do you think it's just completely random and that Black people just get picked up disproportionately because?
I'm suggesting that either you can't do like a perfect random, because human beings aren't perfect, right? But what I'm suggesting to you is if you let's do a thought experiment, okay? Let's imagine we could make a perfect random stop and search, right? Now, we would be in the business of trying to find knives, not doing random stop and searches. So let's imagine we put together four pieces of criteria, right? So let's say that within those 4 criteria, we could do it perfectly at random, just for argument's sake, right? So let's say we only search men, because what's the point of searching women, right? Let's search men in between the ages of, say, 12 and 22, right? Let's do it in poor areas, and let's search people who are in, say, a gang of 2 or 3 with no obvious purpose on the street, right? Now, forget whether you think that. Let's forget whether you think they're good measurements, right? But let's say we could do that perfectly randomly. Now, do you imagine if you went around London and did perfect searches within those 4 brackets? Do you think that would be representative of the population as a whole?
No, I'm asking what I'm asking if we could strip away like the representation. What do you think the tactic in stop and search is? Do you think there's a method, or like a method to the madness, so to speak? Like, what's the tactic?
Well, the tactic is to try and find weapons, isn't it?
Well, yeah, okay. So I'm just reading back to this article. It says the final 2 maps in this section explore patterns of susceptible crimes, i.e. crimes perceived to be susceptible to the influence of stop and search as a tactic. These include robberies, burglaries, vehicle crimes, weapons offences, wounding and drugs crimes. And in this study, they represented 64% of all recorded crime in Chapeltown during the period. So that was 99 to 2000. Of particular interest is whether the distribution of police searches is correlated to the distribution of susceptible crimes. So this is what I'm saying. Are the police going out to focus, that is their tactic to focus and deal with susceptible crimes, i.e. the ones that they are most likely to influence with stop and search, the ones that I mentioned. So this, and I'll repeat this again, of particular interest is whether the distribution of police searches is correlated to the distribution of susceptible crimes.
The whole
that's why I was asking you. Basically, what I'm saying is, let's say you live in the roughest area in London, just for say, thought experiment time. So you live in that area. You look out your window every day. You see cars getting broken into, people smoking crack, people selling crack, buying crack, whatever, like transactions taking place. Would you not, let's say you were a policeman, you went out and put your uniform on, would you not have a particular tactic, a strategy? Would you not say choose to operate in that area the way you'd observed a lot of crimes, or there was an observable phenomena that, you know?
You're not asking me do I think that
I'm basically saying what do you think the strategy is? That's what I'm sort of saying.
Well, you said, I think you've just essentially asked me if you saw an area with lots of crime in it, do you think that area should be policed? Yeah, because, well, of course, I'm going
to read the article. I've literally not said anything but what's in this article. I've just said of particular interest is whether the distribution, i.e., over space, so in a spatial sense, the distribution of searches has a correlation to the distribution of susceptible crimes, i.e., are they stopping and searching people in areas where lots of crime take place? It's very simple. Would you agree that people are more likely to be searched in an area where a lot of crime takes place? It's very simple.
That's the point that I made originally. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, okay. So if that's the point, right, cool. So that leads on to the second part. So if it were to be seen, for example, that susceptible crime, and this is detectable, in other words, detectable obvious crime, in your face crime in like Chapeltown, does the same strategy get applied to areas where, and it's already said that there's a disproportionate, the high number of searches relative to the levels of crime in areas where there are high numbers of Black and Asian people, and that was something that they noted in your. So this is what I don't quite understand why you put this in your video that apparently debunks stop and search when it seems to reinforce. I don't know, like. I'm really confused here because I've actually pulled it up from the web archive. Like
scroll down to the executive summary.
I can tell you why. I can't remember which one it was, but
hang on. Did he ask me a question or did he ask you a question?
A great European once said, "There are lies, damn lies, and statistics."
Yeah, and you haven't even looked at the study because you can't be bothered because you.
And then there's a Jamaican man who says that they're all damn blasted liars.
Indeed, I know that one. That was Merlin's fear.
The guy who's got the study in front of him. Can he scroll down to the executive summary? And there's
executive summary. Yeah.
I think, assuming you've got the same thing as me. Page, hang on, let's see if I can get the page up. Page, what have I got here?
Yeah, I've got it. Executive summaries on. It's the first couple of things in, right?
Right.
Okay, so introduction. The report of the inquiry.
Answers to key questions. It's under the executive summary on the next page. It's got answers to key questions.
Yeah. How useful are residential population figures as a measure of the population available to be stopped and searched? The research presented here shows quite clearly that measures of resident population give a poor indication of the populations actually available to be stopped and searched.
Right. Can we just recognise that is the point that I've made? Can we recognise that? Can even Shaka Ram recognise that?
Hold on. So, no, but I just want to make sure.
Hang on. No. That was the point. Yeah. That was the point I'd made. But he's saying I've got lies, damn lies, and statistics. Right? Can we just recognise that?
If I could just carry on, the available populations in the 5 sites were quite different from the resident populations of the area, so as measured by the 91 census. So I think the argument that's being made here is that the
available populations are very different to the census data.
The census, yes. So, yeah, cool. Right, good. And we expect that because there's a big lag generally with census data. It says most significantly within pockets of high stop and search activity, young men and people from minority ethnic backgrounds tended to be overrepresented in the available population, full stop. The research also notes significant problems with defining what should count as local for the purposes of a resident population when compiling measures of disproportionality. Our stops and searches used disproportionately against minority ethnic groups in the available population question. Overall, across the 5 sites, the findings of this research did not suggest any general pattern of bias against people from minority ethnic groups, either as a whole or for particular groups. So white people tended to be stopped or searched at a higher rate to the available population. Asian people tended to be underrepresented in those stopped and searched, and black people have a more mixed experience, sometimes underrepresented in stop and searches and sometimes overrepresented. Despite these findings, it is noted that possibility of discrimination by officers should not be dismissed. Goes on. Do geographic patterns of stops and searches...
Shakara only heard the last bit. He only heard the last, didn't he?
I heard the whole thing, you know. I'm just laughing at the whole thing. But go on,
So
finish. I'll say what I got.
The research found that stops and searches tend to be targeted at areas that have higher than average proportions of people from minority ethnic groups. It is important, therefore, that this targeted should be justifiable in terms of local crime problems, which is why I asked you if you thought there was a tactic here, because I think there's common sense also applies. But then you would also say, if this article is also showing that, for example, Headingley or other areas in Leeds with a lower population, 4% and 7% of Asian and blacks respectively, that the detected crimes are high, but proportional stop and search is low. So that would represent what you call, I suppose, a tactical kind of tactical sort of disparity, some kind of disparity between the effect that you want to achieve and the tactic, or I don't know, whatever.
Well,
yeah,
it depends,
I mean, it's not.
I don't think of crime. It depends on the type of crime. If there's, for example, you're in an area where there's a lot of tax fraud going on, it's not a wise idea to start going about stopping and searching everyone. It's not going to defeat.
Well, this is why we say it's susceptible. So, I mean, the key thing here is that it seems that the crimes that they mentioned, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into the discussions around like poverty, but I mean, most of these crimes are typically crimes that are committed by the let's say they earn under 20 grand a year at least.
The
on paper.
impoverished is the word you're looking for.
Let me just cut in because I remember a while ago. This is really delayed, but I found the thing on poverty and unemployment that I was talking about. If people want me to go into that, or we can finish up.
Yeah, go for it, man. I've been reading stats and shit all day. So.
All right, so I think it's going to wait. Okay, so I need to apologize. I was slightly wrong about poverty being no correlation. So there is the data basically shows there is a slight correlation between violent crime and poverty, and I appreciate this is in America as well. So it's perhaps not going to be identical to Britain. But,
I would perhaps warn against those kind of I don't know what I'm not sure we're not doing like a kind of cross sort of cross-sectional sort of comparison between I think we're just looking at the US. I'm not sure how much it applies. Like I've studied it doesn't really translate well, to be honest.
Because often it seems that patterns are similar in this sort of
cool. Yeah, go for it.
No, that was pretty much it. There's no correlation between unemployment and violent crime, which was the point I should have said. I'm really just saying this in case anyone
no.
and whatnot.
I mean, if we're going to talk about the sort of depth of I don't know what you want to call it, sort of academic studies and research that's been done, a lot of it has been done. The bulk of it has been done in America. I mean, you had the I think it was the Chicago School was one of the first. It was one of the first groups to kind of look at gang culture in these sort of it's a sociological school. They looked at gangs in Chicago, typically from Irish, Sicilian, Italian, Maltese, Polish, different backgrounds basically, and looked at the sort of social structure of the areas that they lived in, and made various sort of prescriptive recommendations to the police and also to government. I would say though that the Chicago School and the influence of sort of American sociology and criminology has tended to kind of muddy the waters when it's come to independent studies within the UK. Like I conducted a study into gang culture in virtual space. I was looking at kind of YouTube and how gangs are using virtual space because of the fact that the physical space they inhabit is so heavily policed. And there was very little for me to get my teeth into in 2010. That may be different now, but I would say perhaps if we stay on this, because this is actually a really good article, and the thing I was surprised by is that I generally don't. I did watch your stop and search video debunked because I'm subbed, and I was a bit by, and I'm not sure if I clicked the link then and it was unavailable, but like having gone back and found it on the Internet Archive, I can say that this is not a conclusive.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah. So this is my conclusion. On this matter. I forgot yet. Joe came on the platform and made a definitive statement, which is that black youth and black people in general are not disproportionately stopped and searched, and he cited this study, yes, as evidence, yeah, of that definitive statement. The study does not definitively prove that in any way. The study doesn't even claim to definitively prove that.
Did you listen to him read it?
Yeah, we all listen to him read it.
So you missed the part. You missed the part when it compares to populations available on the street, rather than all the other statistics you keep quoting me. You keep quoting me 20 times to be more likely than stops and search, when those statistics are based on population.
Hold on, Joe. No, because Joe, you mentioned the 2011 census. That's where I said I got interested, because you mentioned the census.
That was a separate issue that I was just giving an example.
No, but Joe, you're refusing.
No, but the point is, hold on, Joe. No, I'm going to make the point, because you can't mention the census and then point to an article that debunks. Apparently debunks.
It doesn't make no
because
sense.
the thing is like
I was not using 2011 census data to justify.
No, you were using this article, but this article. No, but the point is, I know what you're saying. This article doesn't use census data. It used, as you said, video cameras on the ground, and it highlighted the distinction between the on the ground, as you could call it, anecdotal experience of crime, i.e., I was stopped yesterday. I got stopped 3 times yesterday, and when we look at the population, there's obviously that. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't map perfectly. But the interesting thing that you said, and I mean, anecdotal evidence is data. I mean, big data is essentially just.
That's exactly what it isn't.
Hold on, I'm just going to stop and land with this. If I go out onto the street now and commit a crime, that is going to get logged. It's going to get logged. If I get arrested, I get a caution. Whatever happens, it gets logged and it goes into the local crime statistics, and it will get mapped into a GIS system. They'll basically put a fucking pin on a map, a digital map, as where I committed the crime, who committed the crime, and I would contribute to crime statistics. Now, if I then went and had a conversation with my friend about my anecdotal experience of being nicked, let's say my friend had access to real-time, updates of data. I mean, he would be able to look at the GIS system and say, well, yeah, okay, your anecdotal evidence seems to tally. I mean, you're on the fucking map. This is how we work. It's how modern policing works. Geographical information systems.
Hang on, You just said, "Oh, anecdote would be linked to statistics." That's how modern policing works. No.
An anecdotal incident is going to be a singular incident. So obviously that's not representative, and it's not necessarily what's the word? I mean, on its own merit. It doesn't hold any kind of sort of, it doesn't hold any. But what my point is that when you add up all of this anecdotal data, assuming that people aren't lying about being stopped and searched or committing crimes or whatever, then there should be some.
But my main
clarity.
My main point is this. Okay. My main point is this. Shekawar will say to his heart's content, right, that black people are 20 times, 50 times, whatever the number is this week, more times to be stop and search, right? I'm saying this. Those statistics are based on stop and search figures compared to population statistics. I'm saying that methodology is flawed. I'm suggesting that if you measure stop and search statistics with populations available on the street to be stopped and searched, you will get something far more representative of the population, right?
I agree.
I point to the only study that's ever attempted to measure that, and it shows that is a lot more proportionate. There's only a plus and minus here or there, right? That is my point. Hang on. You had a long little time to speak, right? I'm saying the statistics you quote are flawed. The statistics I quote are a better way to measure it.
Yeah, but I think my point is that you built an argument on top of statistics that don't fully support your claims.
That's what I'm saying.
They support them a hell of a lot better than yours. It is a.
I haven't made any claims. I'm just reading. I'm going down. I'm reading your data.
Yes, which is the best method to measure
Yeah,
stop and search
but
statistics.
what
and
I'm
not
saying
like
is, if I read
quoting
just
20
one of the
times.
conclusions, all right, answers the key questions. How? Hold on, because it answers the key questions that it laid out at the start, right? It's going to be a bit of a long read, but just listen. How useful are resident population figures as a measure of the population available to be stopped and searched? The research presented here shows quite clearly that measures of resident population give a poor indication of the populations actually available to be stopped and searched, which is what you said. Okay, I agree. I'm with you. By available, we are referring to the people who use public spaces where and when stops are carried out, which is, I think, is the point that you were trying to make to Shakara earlier on. You may not have done so perfectly, but this is what it's saying. Okay, I'm going to carry on. The research illustrates a number of issues relating to this question, which I discussed in turn. The most significant finding is that when we actually looked at the populations available to be stopped or searched within the research sites, they were quite different from the resident populations of the area. Notably, compared with the residential profile, that's from the census, the 91 census, in pockets of high stop and search area, young men are overrepresented in the available population, and the elderly were rarely observed by comparison. Most significantly, however, was the finding that for at least 4 of the 5 sites, those from minority ethnic backgrounds were overrepresented in the available population compared to the resident population. This was true for both the resident population based on police areas or divisions as a whole, or just on those areas where stops and searches occurred most often. What this means in practice is that if everything else was equal, we would expect minority ethnic people to be stopped or searched by the police more often than their numbers in the resident population would suggest. Part of the reason for this is likely to be that many of those available to be stopped or searched are simply not local residents. So this is the issue with local. On-street interviews with pedestrians in pockets of high stop and search activity gave some indication of people's mobility. They showed that over half of those interviewed did not reside locally to the research sites. Okay, so that was one issue with the local and whatever else, but it did, I mean, yeah, the data is the data, but the analysis is something else. And I mean, the data's here with the analysis and with the conclusion.
I don't know. How is any of that conflicted? I'm saying the population's available on the street.
I'll read it out again. Most significantly, however, was the finding.
There's nothing I'm disputing here.
Well, you just said.
I'm saying.
So do you? So hold on. So do you agree? Do you agree with this?
If you keep talking over me, then we can't get anywhere. Okay. That says there the populations on the street available to be stopped and searched are not representative of the population in the census data. What are we disagreeing on here? You've just read out that whole line. It's exactly what I'm saying. Populations available on the street.
The point is that that statement, is not conclusive evidence of whether or not black people are disproportionately stopped and searched. All it does is
listen to what I actually say and not what you hear.
At best, the only thing you have is that there may be a better way to record and transfer, but your argument about trying to debunk stop and search, this article does not do that.
Listen to my actual argument, Shakara. It's very important you listen to my actual argument, okay? They are not disproportionately represented if you compare it to populations available on the street, okay? Which is what we should put the onus on the police to police. They're not policing people in the house. It's no surprise that 80-year-old women are not represented in stop and search statistics because they're not on the street, they're in the house. So when black people are disproportionately represented by census data, that's not a fair way to measure it. They are proportionally represented when you compare it to the populations available to be stopped and searched.
Yeah. So that's the detectable, that's susceptible crime. But I'm just going to carry on because this is perhaps where the mix-up was. Okay, so do police officers disproportionately stop or search those from minority ethnic backgrounds among the available population? We have established that the resident population is not a reliable measure. Okay, good. However, the question remains as to whether police officers are more likely to stop and search those from minority ethnic backgrounds among those they actually encounter in the available population. This issue was investigated in depth. Overall, across the 5 sites, the findings of this research did not suggest any general pattern of bias against those from minority ethnic backgrounds. This was true for minority ethnic backgrounds as whole, as well as any particular minority ethnic group. Asian people tended to be underrepresented in those stopped and searched compared to the numbers available in their local population, with some notable exceptions. The general picture for Black people was mixed. For example, in Greenwich and Chapeltown, they were mostly underrepresented among those stopped and searched. Yet in Hounslow and Ipswich, they were far more likely to be stopped and searched in vehicles than their available numbers would suggest. Perhaps surprisingly, the most consistent finding across sites was that white people tended to be stopped and searched at a higher rate than their numbers in the available population would predict. While the overall picture does not, on the face of it, suggest a general pattern of discrimination against those from minority groups, it is important to flag up certain caveats. Firstly, the findings do not indicate there are some situations where ethnic bias does occur. First, the findings do indicate there are some situations where ethnic bias does occur. While it should not be assumed that discrimination underlies such biases, it does remind us that we should not be complacent in assuming there is no problem. Second, without a full understanding of the ethnic breakdown of suspect information which informs police decision-making, we should not assume there is no discrimination. For example, if a particular minority ethnic group was underrepresented among police suspects, we would reasonably expect stop and searches of such a group to be lower than their representation in the available population. Third, the picture presented by the research reflects the aggregate outcome of stops and searches by officers. This is what I was talking about when it comes to aggregate. So you could ask a policeman, do you nick more people? You know, do you nick more Black people than whatever? I mean, across the board, I mean, you would expect asking enough people that anecdotal evidence should roughly tie in with whatever the big data was. Carrying on. While at this level, there does not appear any general pattern of bias, it remains a possibility that certain officers could still be stopping people from minority ethnic backgrounds disproportionately. And while this practice may be masked by the aggregate statistics, it remains a potential source of alienation at a street level. So this is the anecdotal discussion. Fourth, even if there is no ethnic bias in street level decisions by officers, there may be ethnic biases arising from the areas targeted by targeted by police, I think, to carry out stops and searches. Where this targeting is not justified by local crime plans, it may be seen as discriminatory. Okay, so do we understand that?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Right. I think we're all. Finally, the findings of this research relate to a period of police activity after the publication of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry report, which was critical of the police strategies, and the 5 study sites were all involved in a pilot of recommendation 61 of this report, which I'll get onto. Both of these facts may have had some impact on officer practice, in particular making them more cautious about stopping or searching those from minority ethnic backgrounds. We cannot therefore be sure that the same. I just had a really deep like sigh. Sorry, I know you're on missing right, man. Me too. I really don't like talking to people. So thanks for bearing with us. I'm reading though. Do geographic patterns of stops and searches reflect local crime problems? We've already noted that patterns of stops and searches, far from being evenly spread across police force areas, are focused on particular areas or pockets. We also noted that this focus tended to be on areas which, for whatever reason, contain large populations of residents from minority ethnic groups. Okay, so for whatever reason. And this is where you could chuck in stuff like poverty, like social mobility, like fucking housing authority decisions, all sorts of stuff. So
collapse of the family.
Yeah, we can literally talk about lots of stuff. Fine, good. But for some reason, they've noted that for whatever reason, these areas that are focused on tended to have large proportions of residents from minority ethnic groups. We might therefore expect this focus to contribute to a higher level of disproportionality than if stops and searches were distributed evenly across police force areas. So this is what I was saying before. This is actually the very first point that I made. My issue with stop and search is that it seems to be only when the problems got incredibly bad. There's no uniformity, there's no consistency to stops and searches.
Well, stop and search is a petty tyranny, isn't it? I think we can all agree on that. It's a petty tyranny. But when you've got high levels of stabbings on the street, what else can you do other than try and dissuade kids from hanging having knives on the street. It's a
I'll say this.
you know?
I will say this. I think, and I'm not an anarchist, but I do believe that communities can kind of self-regulate. So, for example,
they haven't been doing, have they? Otherwise, there wouldn't be these standards.
No, but they have.
This is what happens. If the people don't have self-restraint, the state will restrain you. So if you take the police off, if you take the police off the street and the people just are peaceful, the police won't come onto the street. But if they start stabbing each other, the state will.
Let me use this as an example. Which borough of London do you live in? Just off the top.
Yeah, I'll keep that to myself. Actually.
Well, is it south? Is it east? Is it? Oh, you could just say the borough. No one's going to find you in the borough.
Well, just make your point. You don't have to.
Do you know the name of your local gang?
No.
Well, this is what I'm saying. If you told me the name of your local gang, we could probably do something to test this theory. And you know, I could basically, if you told me the area you're from, I could pretty much tell you what your local gang is, and I could probably tell you who they were.
Could you not just make the point you want to make?
Well, yeah. So, for example, if you know the kids on your estate, if you know the local kids in your area, and I mean, the guy earlier was talking about he knows people on Edgware Road who he buys hash off. I mean, it doesn't have to be that you know, on that transactional sort of context alone that you have these discussions. But I think people should know the kids in their local area. The same. I mean, it's just your community. You should know your community, and you know these. This is what I'm saying. When I think it shifts the blame. Like if you've got a gang in your area and you don't even want to say what your gang, you don't know what the gang is, or you don't want to say your area for us to have the sort of proper discussion. I mean, let's just say you live in, I don't know, fuck knows. Let's say Brixton. Let's say you live in Brixton. There's like 5 gangs. There's at least 5 gangs. Hang on, let's count. There's Angeltown. There's Mitesfield. There's Loughborough Estate. There's Stockwell. There's round the back of Acre Lane. You've got Camberwell Bitch. You've got Brandon Estate in Camberwell. You've got Brixton Hill. You've got New Park Estate in Brixton Hill. You've got mate. There's a fucking shit ton of them. There is a shit ton, and that's just one borough. And if you don't know, like, mate, I was really hoping there's going to be a guy come on Scar City. Big up to Scar City Studios. Like, this guy has been covering like knife crime and gang violence across the country and has pretty much an encyclopedic knowledge of gangs at this point. He's informing people. You know, there's people who live in areas who are like, you know, I've watched your video. I never knew there was a gang in my area. I didn't know that they had these issues. I didn't know that there was a boy called Jaden who got shot last week by this person from over here. Mate, this is so nuanced, and if you do care about it and you live in an area where there's been stabbings or shootings, then it's on you as a member of your community to do something about it. And I say that as someone, my brother was stabbed outside my house, and I fucking wish that some people, you know, it was actually my parents couldn't do anything. So I'm not necessarily expecting everyone to have done something, but communities know what happens. Communities shelter these gang members. They shelter the victims of crime. They shelter the fucking the perpetrators. And you know, ignorance is not an excuse. You cannot just be ignorant of, you know, keep your eyes closed and your head buried in the sand and just hope the problem will go away. I would highly suggest that you find out the gangs in your local area. You find out what the actual politics is, and yeah, maybe try and reach out. I don't know, man.
Do you know what though? I'm
wait, sorry.
And I gotta go, yeah.
I just understand something. Just relating back to an earlier point, he said you're not an anarchist, but you know, I mean, I agree. I feel like there should be a greater sense of community. You know, there's a feeling that community has been completely broken down in recent years. But if,
yeah, mate, most people. I mean, you probably don't know the name of your next door neighbours. You probably don't.
I do actually. Yeah.
Good work. You're doing well. Joe, do you know the name of your next door neighbours? Joe? Oh, is he gone? He's gone.
I think he's gone. But no, but my question to you though, just because, and you know, hey, even myself, yes, I know, but you know, I don't have a great sense of community. But I just ask you, are you in favour of like completely abolishing the police and replacing it with a sort of community volunteer?
No. That's some sort of. But I think a community volunteer system could supplement the police. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at Stamford Hill, for example, the Jewish community have been doing this for years. It's not something that's unheard of in certain ethnic groups. I just think it's yet to be taken up by others. So,
I actually think that would maybe be a good idea, as long because I hear some people saying, we need to abolish the police, and obviously, it's just ridiculous. But the supplementary idea is not a bad one. But I get the first step, I suppose. You say reach out. So first of all, how do we reach? How do you reach out to gang members?
There's a really
interesting. And then also, how do you sort of bridge the gap of suspicion between the community and the police?
I'm concerned about Joe. The fact that Joe's ducked out. He ducked out.
Well, hold on. He may well come back. He may well come back. Now,
I'm gonna duck out soon myself. I do want to say something quickly, before I go. But it's been an interesting conversation. I just find it very interesting that when we discuss things like these, the emphasis on police, and increased police presence and them kind of things. When police are an institution of society that is designed to address and deal with crime. And so we're not factoring in causes. This is not a causal conversation. We're not factoring in deprivation of areas. We're not factoring in, we talked about government authority in terms of, enforcing the law, but not provisions for communities and them kind of things there. All of which contributes to crime, criminal activity, poverty, deprived areas, facilities, services, within communities and them kind of things there. None of that is the concern, of many people on the panel at the moment, and I just find that very, very interesting. So Joe comes on to reinforce that the supposed neutrality of the police in the administering of their duties, and it turns out to be a complete nonsense. And this is the point I'm trying to make. That the issue is not, when we're having these conversations often, that the intention is not to solve knife crime in the black community. It is to justify the criminalized image of the black community as promoted by the media and the law enforcement agencies. And that is the fundamental problem. We're not going to solve that problem on this conversation, because that is not the intention of the conversation. The intention is to shield the police from criticism, especially criticism of racism and racial discrimination and criminalization as it relates to the black community. Finally, what we haven't dealt with is the fact that is the results of all this, because you can be stopped and searched, told to go on your way. The reality is that there are disproportionate levels of black people, especially young black people, in prison and in young offenders institutions. And there is no evidence to suggest that black people commit crime in general at higher rates than Europeans or any other community. And this is a problem that we're not addressing. So even if it was the case that stop and search was taking place with minor racial discrimination, the fact of the matter is that there are disproportionate levels of black people in prison, and that cannot be justifiable under any barometer that we want to test it under.
I disagree with you, Shaka, that it's perpetuated by the media. I'm sure that there are a lot of sort of problems at the institutional level, but the media, and obviously I'm going to have my own biased perspective here, but the media to me seems, disproportionately anti-white, if anything.
But you know why on this issue that's not correct? Because you have media honing in on, say, the knife crimes and whatnot, but then where have all the white criminals and the Turkish criminals and all the other types of criminals which don't fit the IC3 model, where are they in the news? Do you know what I'm saying?
I'm going to ask one question. Has anybody ever watched the news report
in organized crime, as if they're not involved in heists, as if they're not involved in robbery, armed robbery, as if they're not involved in violent crime?
Are you suggesting that there's a lack of coverage of white or even non-black crime?
Well, put it this way.
If I could just land with this. So the more organized criminal networks are, the more non-local they become, i.e. they do not need to operate. They don't need to shit where they eat, if that makes sense.
Indeed.
Yeah. Does that make sense? So, with that said, this applies, and there was a label that was quite, it was kind of like, what's the word? Kind of mockingly applied to Jamaican organised crime groups. So the Yardis, as they were known, which was a sort of 90s panic, were sort of spoken about as this unorganized, disorganized, sort of bloodthirsty, ruthless, capitalist kind of criminal. And that archetype kind of stuck, and it actually it was informing police decision making and their sort of tactics. I mean, you read into the case of there was a Supergrass, a guy called Delroy Brown and another guy called Eaton Green. Eaton Green, yeah.
It's not Delroy Brown, it's Delroy Denton.
Delroy Denton and Eaton Green, yes, that's it. Delroy Denton, and Delroy Denton was he was an informant who was being managed, or whatever you want to call it. His handler was a customs and border patrol guy, whatever you want to call him, border force person, and he linked this guy up with Special Branch and basically convinced this Special Branch and the sort of handlers to take this guy as a credible sort of insight into the murky world of this unpenetrated Yardie gang. Yeah. And this guy he knew how to play the system perfectly. He was already on the run for murders in like New York and in Jamaica, and he knew how to deal with the police. He thought the British police were a touch, so he started giving up his enemies on the street. Meanwhile, he was getting more gangsters, more of his mates flown in from Jamaica to commit crimes. There was a case where I think they went and robbed an entire, it was like a dance with 1,000 people in, and they went in, barricaded the doors, took out submachine guns and made everyone empty their wallets into fucking bin bags, robbed the whole place, robbed all sorts of jewelry and whatever. He went on to kill and rape and kill a young woman in Brixton. Yes, Marcia. Yeah, rest in peace to her. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the kind of what do we say? The ethics of the whole program were brought into question, and he ended up, I think, being sent down for murder along with this other guy that he was with.
But now, the whole time, you forget to mention the whole time he was on Scotland Yard's payroll.
He was on Scotland Yard's payroll, and they expected him to be in London, not knowing that Jamaican crime typically is characterized by highly mobile, kind of invisible gangsters who don't use their real names, who, they inhabit other people's houses. So, when they go to court, it's no fixed address. They're non-local. And this is just an individual. Now, those people taught the younger generation of British criminals how to operate. I mean, generally speaking, that's what happens when you go to prison. You just learn how to be better at crime. Other people tell you what they did, how they got caught, you take notes, and you don't get caught. And generally speaking, the 90s was everyone just operating within London. Now, people realise there's not enough junkies in London. There's not enough drug addicts in London. You have to go further afield. And if you go, for example, to Scotland, then the price of a gram of cocaine goes up by like 2.5. So people were going up to Scotland to go and commit crimes. And the smart ones weren't sending the black kids up to Scotland. They were sending the young white kids from their estates to Scotland. Or they were sending the young white kids to Luton, or the young white kids to Northampton, or the young white kids to fucking, wherever it was that there was a market that could be penetrated. And this non-local phenomena is what we're experiencing now with county lines. It's a tentacle network of, criminality that extends from a core and has a periphery. So, a lot of these crimes, they're detected and reported on at the periphery, i.e. you'll get London gang members of no fixed address, so it doesn't actually turn up there from London, operating in a small shire, who get picked up by a local shire police, and they make it onto that police force's database. Meanwhile, that person's actually from London, and all of the money that they make out of town gets sent back to London. And it's ridiculous. Like this I don't know. It's a joke. This is such a complex issue.
But that's where that data was from. Like, it was outdated. It was from a long time.
Yeah, and it also raised the point. It also raised the point that the question of what is local and who is local is important.
Yeah, so now obviously you have dedicated teams on the part of the police which focus on this phenomena and from source or from root to the tentacles, as you put it. And so I guess the figures would be correct going forward because they understand the phenomenon now and are kind of dealing accordingly.
Dude, this country is waiting for a really comprehensive study into this issue. It's not going to happen because it's such a political hot potato. No one really wants. I don't know. I don't think the way that the Labour Party probably want to solve it is not the way that the Conservatives would like to solve it. So that you've got these kind of conflicting approaches to a problem, which I think actually needs. This is a multi-agency problem. This needs to be looked at. Every institution in the country has to kind of address this issue in a uniform way, and then there also has to be a community response, which is the second thing that we were mentioning. I also think private industry has a role to play. There was a case in Chicago in Cabrini Green, which was an infamous housing project complex in the center of Chicago that was knocked down in the early 2000s. Cabrini Green was they had I'm a little bit hesitant.
So, Dan, why don't you tell us what are the Labour and Conservative kind of plans on dealing with the problem?
Well, I would say that the Conservatives just typically are. They seem to be sort of calling for more police, more stop and search, etc., etc. Labour is kind of following the same line with the stop and search because they need to be seen to sort of be tough on things, so they're following the Conservatives in that. But then they also, they mention stuff like sort of they focus more on the sort of social causes. But I think they're hesitant to sort of lay all the blame on society because at that point, are you the government or are you just a blame shifting kind of organization? Like, you're supposed to take some kind of responsibility as the government. And I think the Conservatives would lay most of the blame, I think, at Labour and immigration policies and globalized criminality. I don't know.
Well, Tories also insist that, say, not just more police, but also more money being given to police, which actually doesn't work because it only goes towards the upper echelons of the police as an institution, and you get more, as I said, sort of superintendents and chief detective inspectors, so all these sort of superiors, and really no more kind of constables actually on the ground, to kind of interact with the community.
Hey, I'm out. Yeah, take care. It's a good conversation.
Okay, take care.
Love content. I did it for you, content. Get me? Love. Peace.
Love, brother. I know, fam.
Later.
Come here.
Oof, mic drop. So, I don't know. I don't know. It's I kind of feel like neither party is sincere in wanting to solve the problem, and I don't think any party has a clear roadmap for how to do it.
Oh, I hate them both. They're both useless. The two main ones, that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like, if a politician, real politics happens on council estates. Real politics is going on right now on council estates between kids, and there's gangs. Like, if you can't bring warring gangs within London to the table in some kind of manner, how do you expect them to solve the world's problems? How do you expect to get the Israelis to sit down with the Palestinians? I mean, this is just the scale of it. At whatever scale we discuss it.
We got sidetracked before you actually got into answering me, but I just restate my earlier question is, so, or it's two really. So how do you do this? So how do you reach out to the gangs? How do you overcome the sort of, community's suspicion of, I don't want to go anywhere near these sort of youths in hoodies on their council estates? But then the other question is, sort of what steps need to be taken to then also bridge that kind of gap of suspicion between the community and the police?
So in the case of Cabrini Green in Chicago, I'm going to put this in the back chat afterwards if I can find it. So keep an eye on it over the next few days. If I can't find it tonight, I will definitely post it. But it was a really interesting scheme that was run by private enterprises in Chicago. There's one I say indigenous, like a native Chicago firm, a big firm that was involved. And they essentially sent their employees into inner city areas on the weekend to operate Saturday schools. And these were like, it was really, really well sort of funded. They tracked a lot of these kids sort of similarly to like a sort of children in our time type study, like a sort of, you know, longitudinal study of that particular area. And I mean, there was, you know, like school achievement went through the roof, motivation went up. You know, there was all sort of metrics that they sort of looked into. It was fairly short-lived, though. I think it only ran for about 5 years or so before gang violence sort of became really, really bad, and security was more a sort of question. But that was actually put through during Reagan's administration. So this was kind of, I suppose, a conservative approach. Let's use big business to throw some money at this problem. And it sort of gives the businesses an ability to sort of, you know, get some, you know, sort of, I don't know, social justice type credentials, which is always quite, you know, I think businesses jump at.
Yeah.
Something like that. If you could have like, you know, Barclays, for example, could sponsor, I don't know, just activities on estates. You know, pick an estate. Why don't you build some Boris bikes on an estate, and then also have a system where X amount of money from the bikes goes to, you know, I don't know, something to support a room on the estate, something like that. I would say, you know, local people, a lot of these kids, they're more scared of kids from the other side than they are of the people, like civilians, as you're known, as we're known. Like they're not really bothered about us. It's you know, someone like me or you know, relatively well educated, you know, sort of out of the mix of the streets kind of thing. You know, there's a lot we can offer. You know, if it's something you could mentor a kid. You know, you could, you know, I don't know if there was sort of official schemes, and if it wasn't a thing where, you know, fucking, we don't trust, like, who are you to be looking after my kid kind of thing. You know, we could have this. It could be fairly open, and the community would kind of, I think, would regulate itself. I would say, you know, some sort of education. Like, if you live in London, you should kind of know, like, what's happening on the street. Like, okay, the kids in your area may seem disconnected because of, you know, culture or ethnic background or age, whatever it is, but you know, they're as much a part of our society as, you know, I don't know, the lollipop lady or the binman or whoever it is. I mean, it's, so I don't know. I don't want to sound like some fucking, but yeah, I think we can all do something. I don't think it's solely down to the government, and I don't think it should also be solely down to groups like gang, because then, you know, then we've only got one group. Oh, if the problem hasn't been solved, and if gang's the only group that stepped up to try and do anything, then let's blame gang. Well, no, let's blame all of us, because gang, technically we could have all joined gang. There could be gang chapters in every area. You could be a member of gang, I could be a member of gang, Joe could be a member of gang, and yeah, I don't know, like, then it actually sort of, it means something. But, you know, whatever the name is, as long as the function is performed, and as long as there's, I think, some attempt to reach out to kids and sort of steer them, you know, onto the right path, then you know, I think we're going to be dealing with this problem for quite a while, unfortunately.
But don't you feel like every generation, when it gets to around that age there, the teenagers, early teenagers, that's when the violence starts. Like that's when they start getting active, like on the road life and all of that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's testosterone. Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. Like, I really thought I was invincible when I was that age. I didn't think anyone could knock me out. I thought that, you know, I'd never really been hurt. Like, when you're a teenager, you could fall from a substantial height. It's like you're made of rubber. You try doing that when you're in your 30s, you're never going to be the same again. So, you know, kids sort of have this reckless kind of abandon when they're at that age, and you know, they're also fiercely loyal. It's the first time that they've actually felt, you know, maybe, you know, sort of they're coming into themselves as young men, but as a group, as a peer group. Like, what does that mean? Like, we're all growing up together. We've all got the same, you know, I don't know. We've got the same. I mean, the ironic thing in London, like, these gang members share more in common with each other than not. There's way more that brings them together if they're actually prepared to be honest about it than than actually divides them. Now,
well, they're
it's not
all
to say
disenfranchised. They're all, you know, not particularly well off unless they're successful at criminal activity. They're all young. They're all sort of feel neglected. But the question, but how do you sort of, you know, break down that one barrier of just, well, you're in a rival gang, so, you know, so be it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I mean, a lot of the enmity, sorry, that you know, is a lot of this is historic. I mean, there's issues between certain areas. It's just historic. It goes back generations. You know, so and so killed so and so, or so and so robbed. So I don't know, whatever it is, and for whatever reason, it kind of trickles down. But the important thing is that young men typically, and I mean, this is just basic philosophy, like the idea of the other in relation to I, like me versus you, the I that is me and the sum of my experiences versus you. And that, what's the term? There's a word called sonder, which is sort of one of these pseudo feelings that's been brought up to describe the feeling of realizing that everyone lives like an equally complex and kind of deep life as you. And this can happen sometimes. I don't know, it sort of happens at various points in your life. You're just like, oh shit, everyone's going through this. That doesn't really hit teenagers at all, really. They generally feel like they're the only ones going through what they're going through. And
so that's what
anything that happens is as bad as it's ever, like...
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Don't you feel like it's like 20 years is going to go by and that generation at that moment are going to be discussing the violent youth around that age there, like that as well?
Yeah.
Could well be, but at the same time, you know, like kids these days do seem to get more and more sort of brave and kind of cheeky, as it were. I don't know if that's your guys' experience, but I wonder if they'd even mature to that extent, you know, or if they'd, with the state of things, they'd sort of stay these kind of angry, you know, hostile, you know, right into their 30s, you know.
Yeah, no,
there's such...
if man live like that for that long, man, you're gonna drop out or you're gonna go to prison, in it. So
exactly.
There's a quite a famous track by the rapper Nas called Second Childhood.
Second Childhood, that's a banger, fam. I'll play that if you want a striking thing, you get me?
No, Second Childhood is one of the, it's a brilliant song, and it basically describes it's a couple of different like characters he talks about. There's a young girl who's living her second childhood, who still can't, you know, she's got babies, she's got responsibilities, but she still wants to go out to clubs, she still wants to sort of be on the social scene. And then it also describes this guy who I'm gonna have to get up the lyrics. Yeah, Leon, you can paraphrase, man.
He comes fresh out of prison, and he go, obviously enough time's gone by, but it's like he sees the youngers out on the block and all of that, and he's like, it's him that, I mean, it's them that he wants to be like. So obviously he's hanging out there, so a big old man.
He moves with his peers, different blocks, different years, sitting on different benches like it's musical chairs. All these people moved on in life. He's on the corners at night with young dudes. It's them he wants to be like. It's sad, but it's fun to him, right? He never grew up. 31 and can't give his youth up. He's in his second childhood. Like, that's the second verse. But yeah, you see a lot of this, and you know, when you're in your second childhood, let's say you've just come out of doing 14 years or something, you know, you got sent down when you were, I don't know, 19 or something, you come out in your 30s, you just go back to what you knew. You go back to the, you know, the estate where you're from, your mum's house, probably, whatever else, you got bailed there, and everything's changed. These kids have got like mobile phones, they're Snapchatting each other, they're holding these like, you know, these phones in front of their face, and when you went in, everyone was on, you know, analog Nokia phones. Now everything's digital, touchscreen, digital. And you're actually seeing it now. Like, I'm not going to name any names. There's certain social media personalities, should we say, who are what you would describe as a washed up roadman, yeah, who've basically just realized that there's this whole new social media world that you can engage with and be relevant in, and it's virtual. You don't have to risk your life out on the real streets. You can go onto the virtual street, and you can project your, you know, everything that you are essentially with a camera.
I feel like in order for like the cycle to stop continuing on. Like I said, fam, 20 years is gonna go by. Probably still gonna be youths them out there who's keeping up the same shit, but it's like a more like you're saying, a more hyped up version. You get me? I feel like man have to man have to learn or start to see their worth in the world. You get me? Like I don't know. I feel like at them ages, there enough man who get caught up in that type of lifestyle. They don't see themselves as having no
value.
There's no inspiration. There's no. There's no.
Man don't relate to the rest of the world that are busy making innovating scientific discoveries and all of these type of things, going to work 9 to 5.
It's just not cool. It's just not there.
Construction sites and all of them things. They look at that like a separate world to man. You get me? So it's trying to make man.
Go on, sir. You wanted to jump in?
Yeah, man's got as much ability to shape their environment rather than just be a product of it. You get me?
Yeah, I just wanted to distinguish between.
Totally.
You see, like you have crime or violent crime, shall we say, that's associated with the drug trade, and I think that's nothing unique when it comes to the black community. You see what I'm saying? So I would put violent crime that's associated with drugs in the wider context of violent crime and that's associated with drugs. You see what I'm saying? It's not unique to the black community. But then you also have violent crime, which is almost like superfluous. You have a excess type of situation where it's almost like you think to yourself it's mindless when we hear the reports, and that's usually what is in the news. So I'm talking like a couple that comes to mind, for example, most strikingly is the attack on like a pregnant woman, for example, and those kind of things which you just think are like just seriously mindless, and you think how can a human like do such a thing? And for me, I would attach that phenomena to what content was talking about there. So a lack of self-worth, so this lack of value, but then also the state of mind that they're in due to abuse that they've suffered, be it like emotional or otherwise, maybe both emotional and physical. So that feeling of worthlessness is, doubled or tripled, and it's like it's put them in a place where not only do they feel disempowered, but now there's a tension with that disempowerment when they actually do have power, like as you were saying, like when they're coming of age now. So they do have power, and they can, or if they just pick up a knife, you know what I'm saying? And now there's that tension now between the disempowerment they feel and the empowering nature of quote unquote power. And so you see it kind of met out in like a mindless way.
I mean, that's the thing. I think it would be stupid to assume that the violence that's going on in the street is mindless, because you miss out. I mean, these kids, they might not have the emotional maturity or the I don't know, the sort of
mind you, the gang violence and violence on the streets, I would attach that to violence that occurs with drugs, and that's not unique to the black community. So that this manifestation we're seeing with it when it comes to street gangs, right? If we're talking about, obviously there are surrounding issues like long-standing beefs and inherited beefs and so on and so forth, but for the most part, if we can apply a section, I wouldn't dismiss it as say quote unquote mindless. I would put it down to the violence that.
All right, let me ask you this then, because this is where it gets confusing. So let's imagine you got two, should we say, street entrepreneurs, who've made it into their 20s. They've got loads of money, loads of girls, whatever else. Let's say they're friends growing up. They've both done their thing, and then one of them sleeps with the other one's baby mum, or vice versa, girlfriend or something. So what you're essentially dealing with is an interpersonal issue, and it may indeed lead to a crime of passion at some point. Now, typically what happens in those cases, if you're a gang member and you decide to go and kill someone, from, let's say, the other area, because they specifically targeted your girlfriend because she was your girlfriend and because you're from the other area, what's your motivation? Are you doing it because of the slight, the personal slight that you took over your girlfriend, or are you doing it for your area and for some sort of gang identity? Because this is the thing, a lot of this stuff gets conflated. a crime of passion can occur between two gang members, i.e., you stab my brother, I'm going to kill you, something like that. And you know, social groups typically form around, you know, if you know, I don't know, you can all be from one area, one of your friends gets beaten up, that creates a sort of
there's an
it can
incentive.
create violence.
There's an incentive to go and sort of kind of stick up for. In a sense, you've already got a sort of, you know, a mini sense of community, you know, of kind of, oh, you scratch my back, I'll go and beat up the guy who you know, roughed you up or slept with whoever, or you know, like there's always an incentive, and I think this was discussed earlier, but drugs are only sort of one side of a kind of many-sided coin. So, you know, yes, I think that decriminalizing drugs, certainly cannabis and all class C drugs, would be of benefit, but is it the sole or the central problem? I wonder.
Yeah, no, I agree.
No, I wouldn't reduce the issue to a drug issue. I was simply just distinguishing between two forms of violence, and I wasn't saying that that's exhaustive either. There are other situations as well, like you've kind of illustrated. One of them reminded me of like a Rapman video I've seen, one of his dramas he put out there. But obviously that's reflective of social realities. So I know, like, there's no doubt there's all types of situations and scenarios which can play out, and it's not necessarily reducible to one or two factors. Yeah.
There's lots of issues, man. Sorry, was that you, Siri? Was that Jacob coming through?
No, you go.
Yeah, no, go for it, man. I've spoken at length tonight. I mean, I don't know. I think I agree with what you said so far about like drugs. I don't think it's the full issue, as you said. It's multifaceted, yeah, I think a kind of multi agency approach plus the community. Plus some individual responsibility, because I'm just gonna chuck that out there, because there's a whole heap of very responsible gang members who keep themselves, you know, circumspect, go to university, and they do make it out. It's not uncommon for that to happen. It's not. I mean, yeah, it's not the everyday example, but it does happen. So
there's potential. There's potential for it to occur.
Yeah, I mean. There are some, I mean, you know, through affiliation, association, whatever, I mean, some kids are able to kind of stay at the fringes of sort of gangs, should we say, and then kind of make it out. You know, not everyone is pulled in, not everyone is as heavily invested. But you'll find typically in a gang, I mean, if it's got sort of 50, let's say 40 or 50 members, there'll be a hardcore of perhaps, you know, 5 to 10 people who who are really driving the violence, who are really driving the tension, you know, and keeping the kind of the conflict going. There's other people who don't really want to be involved. It rests on certain people, and you know, are you gonna back my man? Are you gonna ride for my man? And you know, once people start getting killed, it's a different thing. Like, you know, things don't get forgotten. You know, people can go to prison, but there's countless cases of people being killed literally on the prison outside prison gates. You know, they come out from 10 years, 15 years, it's not been forgotten. And you know, because of that as well, you know, people's allegiance to a gang can transcend a prison sentence. So you know, they go to prison, they represent the gang in prison, and they come back out to the gang. Yeah, it's quite common for, you know, gang members. They get released now, and it's a champagne celebration, hired cars, you know, video man on set just because you came out of prison. I mean, it's, yeah.
Never mind that it's a recruitment ground as well.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I mean, I don't know how. Again, there's different factors that, you know, drive recruitment, but I mean, yeah, kids obviously seeing that, it puts across a certain optic that makes, you know, it makes it look appealing. You see this camaraderie, you see this, you know, these kind of brotherly bonds. What you don't see behind the scenes is all the snaking that goes on, all the backbiting, all the backstabbing. I mean, it's not as glamorous as it's cracked up to be. And any gang member, anyone who's been on the roads will tell you, you know, things are not they're not what they're cracked up to be. Your perception of it when you're 15 will definitely change.
Yeah, not everybody rides out. So when something happens, you know, you're painting this picture like, yeah, there can be ongoing violence, but a lot of times, the others, you know, they don't do nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so that goes into the snaking aspect. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for real. I mean, so I can touch on the personal experience. So, yeah, my brother was stabbed when I was in my second year at uni, and I just kind of remember being around these people who had no idea about what I was going through, like very middle class people, left wing kind of hippies, and my brother had been stabbed, and went to the hospital the next day, and like all of my friends were there, and I was like, yeah, so what we doing then? And there was a very clear we. Like I was like, who else is with me on this then? And this was my brother. I mean, like, I don't know. Like I expected there to be like, you know, some kind of loyalty based on whatever interaction I'd had with, like, you know, my friends. And I mean, yeah, things didn't. Yeah, that luckily for me, that whole situation kind of died away, and yeah, it was sorted out in another way. But I mean, I know what it's like to want to kill people, like wake up angry, frustrated at yourself because you haven't done something, and that person is still out there.
Yeah, of course.
And that I mean, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of kids want to share that burden. You know, if they've been affected by someone, if there's been some kind of grievance, you know, it helps to have people who will share that with you and will take the burden off of you. So, you know, this is another reason why the gang dynamic is so appealing to people, let's say, who do have problems. You know, so you can get into a fight. You get into a fight and then you realize, oh shit, like that person's really well connected. Shit, I better go and it does happen like that. You know, people aren't in gangs, but maybe no gang members, and you know, for one reason or another, they stay on the fringes until they realize that it's in their interest to join a gang because they're too far in.
Well, this is why, just bringing us back to the sort of possible solutions, like some sort of, you know, community, like youth club or sort of I don't know to say therapy, but some kind of, you know, social task force.
They're not. See, that's not really gonna see the Saturday club and youth club ventures. It's not really gonna.
No. But I don't mean just that. I don't mean, yes, you know, they can all just go and play on swings and roundabouts, kind of, and they'll all grow up happily. But you know, if there's some sort of place, I forget what it's called, the thing where it's like a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous, but for people who have done really bad shit. You know, people who have been in that situation of you know, potentially wanting to go out and get involved, you know, and kill people, and who feel just really sort of you know, like they have a real grievance. I wonder if having something where there was like a circle of people who, you know, could get together and share their pain without then thinking, okay, let's go and find whoever did this and do this and that to them, and you know, who's with me in this sort of retribution. And instead,
it's interesting that you say that, because there's a guy, I'm not actually sure if he's doing it. He's sort of I think he actually went through some mental health issues and may or may not be still involved in sort of youth work, but it's a guy called Jason Featherstone, and Jason Featherstone was at one point advising the government on approaches to youth violence by basically looking at violence as a public health issue and imagining kind of violence as a disease. So essentially, you know, the best example I can use, going back to me in the hospital, I was diseased. My brother was diseased, and we were trying our best to transmit the disease to other people, basically because we didn't want to be the only ones. And you know, the public health approach looks at it's more to do with the underlying factors, the risk factors that may or may not sort of preclude someone to being either a perpetrator of or a victim of violence. So, you know, typically one of the main predictors of violence is previous cases of violence or previous incidences of violence. So, i.e., I'm more likely to be violent if someone has been violent to me, or if, you know, I've suffered some kind of violent aggression.
Well, that's the same with that's the same with like sexual assault, isn't it? If you were molested as a child, then often you end up.
Absolutely.
Well, no, not often, but often if people are paedophiles, it's when they've been molested as a child. So.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I think the this approach was actually trialled in Glasgow. And I don't want to sound like a Carla here because he always talks about Glasgow and whatever else, but this was actually the approach that was successful in Glasgow. And yeah, the public health approach, as opposed to the kind of criminal justice approach, seems to be more successful. And I mean, yeah, there's various sort of, I think they're called violence interrupters. It was a scheme that was done in Chicago. It was like a pilot scheme that Jason Featherstone was involved in, and he went out there, met up with those guys, came back. He did like a London Real podcast on violence and gang crime, which is really good, really interesting. Recommend anyone watching to pick it up. Say again.
No, go on.
I think he was trying this. Jason, I think he's from Tottenham, and he was like a sort of affiliated member of what was known in the sort of early 2000s as TMD, the Tottenham Man them, and sort of knew Mark Duggan and various people connected to Tottenham, Broadwater Farm, Tiverton, Ida, the other estates around there, whatever. And he was going into Parliament, speaking with the Home Office, and I'm not actually sure what happened with him. Like I said, I think he was going through some personal issues, and he may not be doing the same thing now. But that approach was mentioned by Steve O'Connell, the chairman of the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee in 2018. They put 500,000 towards early interventions at school level, healthcare, sort of healthcare professionals, councils, and the police also received this 500 grand, which I don't think is it's not much. But a violence interrupter program, I mean, and this is actually stuff that gang do. Like gang, I believe, do this kind of violence interruptions thing. They're aware of what's going on, and you know, when there's a stabbing or a shooting, as was the case in Northwest London. I mean, there was two in Monks Park, Stonebridge, Monks Park, like a couple of weekends back, and Raspect was out there, you know, the same weekend. You know, someone being on the ground when this stuff happens, you know, at the site of the murder, if there's mourners there, because I mean, I'll tell you one thing for free. If you want to find, I mean, gang members are normal people as well. They go to these shrines that pop up. I think actually, in the case in Hackney last weekend, I think there was, I think 2 people got shot at on like Kingsland Road. There was a memorial for someone else who'd been killed, and loads of this guy's friends like went and sort of, you know, stood out on the street there, and I know someone come past and like fired a shotgun off or something like that. It was in the paper the other day. There's been cases. There was a guy called there's a kid from Brixton called Josie, who was he's from an estate, Summer Leighton estate in Brixton, and he was kind of he was like, just him as an individual, he was like a really kind of pivotal. He knew people from all across the divide. Like I mean, basically when he died, like lots of things went wrong on the streets. But this guy, when he got killed, there was a separate murder at his funeral, where, you know, like that gang, their enemies came to the funeral and shot someone. So I mean, yeah, like it's important to be there on the street, like be out there, and like, you know, it's.
What's man feel about private prisons? It's like,
no, don't even get me started, Leon, bro. Sheesh.
Because my reason why I bring that up is like, obviously they're dependent on criminals filling their prisons, in it, like it's a business, in it, they're trying to make peace. So they must, you have to, like, if you're thinking business wise, you have to like plan and foresee the future in order to try to run in it. So I'm saying those same people there that's able to assess whatever it is that they're assessing and coming to the conclusion that there's going to
be more crime and we're going to need more prisons.
Why like there needs to be people that are thinking analytically like that, like criminologists and whatever it is, sociologists or whatever it is, whatever studies that's making them so confident that they're gonna profit by building prisons. They must be able to divert that, or to change certain whatever it is that they can see to make it so man obviously don't need to do that. You get me? But I can make a profit incentive that's gonna benefit them and benefit the people that would have been criminals but can be something else.
Well, I mean, it's like when it comes to prisons, that's perhaps one area where I think, okay, maybe it would be in our interests if the government had a monopoly on the prison system. So I think, when it comes to, the areas which government should really sort of meddle around in, I think the, defense of the nation, so the military, and the justice system and the courts of law, and then also the police. And other than that, I'd rather they stay out of my lives. But when it comes to prison, I think there is a case to be made that, yes, prison, of course, is part of the justice system. And therefore, do we want people who are sort of just, amassing, kind of attaining prisoners and seeing them as nothing more than profit? Or do we want a kind of a state that is actually going to keep them sort of under control outside the realms of for profit?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think prisons for profit, or the profit motive in general, when we're dealing with, such a key kind of institution, I think it just leads to, I mean, one, conflicts of interest. I mean, I think that, if, for example, taxpayers bore the burden for, essentially social problems, so society pays for society's problems, then it's more pressing. I mean, society is then more pressed to sort of do something about it, to save money. You're then incentivized to say, okay, how do we cut crime so that we don't pay as much in taxes to support state-run prisons? The private prison industry, I mean, like Serco and stuff, who just have these, like, they a company like Serco, I mean, they're into everything, from prison vans to sort of military logistics chains or whatever it is. The private prisons is just, one money maker in their portfolio of money making operations.
Yeah. But also what's disturbing though is that if you're entirely under the jurisdiction, because you do lose certain rights as a prisoner, and often, with fairness, I mean, I'm not particularly concerned about, all the rights of some child rapist. It doesn't really bother me, but in principle, the idea that you do sort of, by definition, you give up some rights as a prisoner, it's then like, I feel like the private system has more kind of jurisdiction to really get away with a bit more than under the state. So I had a really interesting conversation with a friend a while back who was saying, because I'm just like so against taxation and I'm pretty libertarian in that sense, other than the three areas that I said before. And he said, so, okay, if you're against taxation, are you also against slavery? And I said, well, yes, of course. And he said, oh, so private prisons then, forcing prisoners to do community service. What about that then? Is that not some way slavery, and how do you justify that? And I said, yeah, that, in fairness, that is a case for maybe, okay, one thing taxation could be used for is, not because we want to be protecting child rapists, but because we don't like the idea of a private system that basically could just exploit, cheap labor.
Yeah, agreed. I think Kanye West is on that at the moment. He's on a big prison reform drive. He's had Kim Kardashian in prisons and shit. Yeah. bringing prisoners to the boil. I can't imagine that. Imagine being locked up for life and Kim Kardashian just walks in.
Well, interestingly, Donald Trump has done the same a while ago. He passed prison reforms which took it easier on people who were in there on lesser charges. So like drug crimes, sentences were lessened or people were let out, and I thought it was a good thing,
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm not a Make America Great Again Trump supporter, but I supported him. If he was up against Bernie Sanders, then maybe Bernie would have got my vote. But he was up against Clinton, so. Trump,
you would have voted for Bernie, would you?
I'm not sure. In hindsight, maybe. I mean, I was a Bernie guy, and I didn't like what they did to him. The what do you call it? The the selection thingy. Basically, yeah, I would have supported Tulsi Gabbard had she been running, and I probably would support her over Trump. But I'm not one of these people who denies that Trump is like. I don't think Trump is some fascist dictator who's like done nothing.
You're against him. You might feel a sort of less biased view on it rather than just he's a fascist. Get him out.
I want to see what Kanye West does with him, to be honest, because I mean, yeah, Kanye, like I said, has been really pushing this prison reform stuff. He was talking about releasing the leader, the head of the Gangster Disciples, a guy called Larry Hoover, who's been locked up for decades now, because he believes that basically only Larry Hoover holds the key to solving the problems in Chicago. And a similar plea was made with a guy called Tukey Williams, who was one of the founding members of the Crips in LA. And I think he was actually executed. But there was cause to release him because the net benefit of him being back out on the street, being able to kind of go around and sort of try and sort of educate miseducated kids was. I mean, yeah, there would have been a benefit to it, but I mean, unfortunately, he didn't get released, and I don't think they're going to release Larry Hoover. But I mean, these are the kind of approaches. I mean, they're kind of out there, but I tend to think that I'm more focused on results. So it may be controversial, but if it solves the issue, then okay, cool. Like it's the means justify the ends. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know if I've got much to say. I'm going to mute. I've been chatting a lot. Big up to everyone on the panel.
I think I might head out at this point because we've been going for about 3 hours now. So
I was waiting to 12 o'clock to see if Hangouts blows up. You get me?
Yeah.
It's the final day. Yeah, man.
It's midnight now. I don't know if anyone is it midnight for everyone else.
Yeah.
3 minutes.
Hey Jay, can you give me a answer? Is it midnight for everyone else?
Again.
Yeah, it's midnight for me as well. Still.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I'm supposed to buy Acurus.
Unless people have anything else to say, I think I might cut out for now and speak to you all whenever the next time is.
Yeah. Boy, next time it's going to be a next. I'm going to have to use the next app. You get me? I'm going to have to research trying to see the gin and tonic show. They were piloting some different apps still. It look good still, car. A few different perks you can use. You get me?
Yeah. Okay.
It's probably gonna be midnight in California, probably, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, you might be right. But yeah, Leon, I'll tell you about another way of routing this whole thing anyway. We can work on that, man.
Yeah. I saying that, man.
All right. In a bit, lads. Good talking.
Done, no, bro. Yeah. It's a wrap thing. Still this. Does anybody else want to say anything else before man cuts? Still, man's cutting up.
Nah, we're good, man. We're good. Big up to the viewers.
I've done no respect.